Chapter 231, Hyperbolic Time Chamber. Broly's head slowly turned towards Goku, who had listened in on the conversation. Goku was scratching the back of his head, while laughing as if what was just said wasn't a big deal. A vein bulged on Broly's forehead before he relaxed again. He deeply sighed out. Of course he did. When was it? Should be yesterday, right? I probably have another week left for preparation. Broly asked Vegeta. Vegeta's face darkened even further as he heard Broly's questions. A week ago. A day after the fight on Exausia, Broly just let his head drop on the table as he just couldn't take it anymore and asked disheartened, "When is the tournament?" "Tomorrow." Silence. No one said anything as they all knew what was on the line. The only thing clearly hearable were Broly's deep breaths. Aaliyah sat down next to him and caressed his back to cheer him up. However, Broly stood up and walked towards Goku. "You fucking moron." Broly screamed at Goku, who just laughed it off. Broly's body was heaving heavily as if he was about to lose it. He closed his eyes and breathed out long. "Phew, at least, I managed to stall this tournament for 3 years. Otherwise, I wouldn't have my breakthrough or couldn't even have participated dash." Broly said, calming himself down by seeing the positive side of things. "Actually, I wouldn't have asked Zenchan to hold the tournament. It was only after I achieved Super Saiyan Blue that I was confident enough to take on the other universes." Goku said with a laugh. "Sweetie, some things should be kept to you." Jine said with a slight smile on her face. She knew what was about to happen. "That's it. You are dead." Broly suddenly shouted as he grabbed Goku at the neck and flew away. In the distance, the thunderous booms were indication enough to what was happening, but no one made any attempts to help Goku out of this predicament. Bulma suddenly thought of something. "Aaliyah, didn't you say Broly had been to another universe?" Aaliyah turned around and was a bit confused by the question. "Yeah, why?" Bulma didn't answer her, but she instead turned to her husband. "Who out of you, Goku and Broly, is the strongest?" Vegeta was startled by the question and crossed his head as he seemed reluctant to answer the question, but under Bulma's scrutinizing glare, he gave in. "I suppose Broly is slightly stronger than Kakarot or me." Bulma rubbed her chin as she pondered out loud. If even Vegeta admits that Broly is stronger, that means Broly is actually on a whole level above the two. Vegeta gritted his teeth as he listened to Bulma's mumbling. However, he didn't refute her. Since Broly seems to know more about the other universes and seemed to want to be even stronger before the tournament starts, wouldn't that mean that the other universes have some scary powerful beings? As soon as her question fell, the others seemed to have realized her concerns and began panicking as well. At this moment, Broly reappeared with a person that had a swollen face, which made it hard to identify the person. He landed calmly before he gave Goku to the other Earthlings, who tried to feed him a healing capsule, but to no avail as his mouth was too big to eat anything. "Broly!" Vegeta shouted out. "We have a room called Hyperbolic Time Chamber, in which 1 year is only 1 day outside. How about we head there and train?" Vegeta said as he pointed into the direction of Din's lookout with his thumb. In the meantime, Oolong used force to squeeze the capsule into Goku's mouth. Broly thought for a second. "Sure. By the way, who will be in our team?" Vegeta started flying towards the lookout as he shouted, "I will tell you on the way, let's go." Broly patted Aaliyah on the head, and then quickly caught up to Vegeta. Another light could be seen following shortly after the two. "Wait for me, I want to train too." Goku screamed out mid-flight. Broly stepped into the pocket dimension called Hyperbolic Time Chamber and could immediately tell the difference. He also instantly knew that even though some flaws had already been fixed, so one wouldn't die if one entered a third time, it still shouldn't be used carelessly. Time is a dangerous concept in this multiverse. When he had stepped inside, he felt that his inner clock of his body, meaning the operating functions of his cells, had been forcefully quickened to match it to this dimension. Broly directly knew that even though he could train his body in here, to temper his soul would be incredibly difficult. His soul, after all, wasn't really influenced by the time difference. If he trained in here, his soul would experience no faster gains than in the outside world. Furthermore, if he trained his body, it would create an imbalance between soul and body, which would influence his growth in the future. Of course, if time difference only limits itself to a few tens of years, it wouldn't be too noticeable. Fortunately, his body was created by the pure energy through his soul. He could easily adjust the cells in his body, so the imbalance would be nil. He even could reverse engineer the effects of this dimension to use it to accelerate the time of his soul, but a mistake there would be even more harmful than the imbalance. Broly threw out these thoughts and focused on what he could do now. He would first perfect his control over his God Ki and his other transformations, maybe even look further into Ultra Instinct, if there was enough time to do so. He probably wouldn't achieve a great leap in strength in this single year without the growth of his soul, but he could still improve faster than if he had trained 1 day outside. With that in mind, he first familiarized himself with the house, and then stepped onto the ground of the seemingly endless white. He was stared at by Vegeta, who seemed to wait for a little sparring session. Goku jumped onto the ground and positioned himself next to Vegeta. Broly, I am going to pay you back for the beating just now, Goku said with a laugh and directly turned Super Saiyan God with Vegeta following suit. Broly couldn't help but laugh at their confident expression and Goku's claim, ha ha ha, how about I teach the two of you some humility? Broly stomped the ground and Tortu sparred with the two Saiyans for several days. However, as strong as the two were now, the potential learning achievement for Broly was limited, and since the three all had their own ideas to achieve the next level of power, they spent most of the time training for themselves, only joining every couple of weeks to have a spar against each other. Broly stepped out of the time chamber first and directly went and cleaned himself up before creating new clothes. Vegeta and Goku came out too and changed before the three teleported towards Bulma's courtyard, and as if they had planned it, the other Earthlings and participants were already waiting for the two deities of their universe. Even Cell seemed to have thought that it was normal to meet up here. Cell was currently teasing Gohan and a young girl next to him. Broly rubbed his chin as he remembered that originally around this time would be Boo's appearance. Gohan should be going to high school now. Although Gohan wouldn't be a great scholar, all these years Chi-Chi still forced him to learn at least a bit. Videl next to Gohan seemed to have already been smitten by Gohan. As young as she was, she couldn't hide her stares that were already all over Gohan. Satan was conversing with Bulma about some business. Surprisingly, he seemed to be less of a coward than in the series. He also didn't seem as arrogant, which was his lucky call as Broly would have killed him if he were. It was probably because of the humiliation back then, when Satan had pissed himself because of Broly's aura. As Satan wasn't the hero of this planet after Broly had showed Earth the real extent of martial arts, his family wasn't as rich anymore. However, they weren't bad off either. Satan seemed to have learned genuine martial arts after witnessing the Broly games and achieved a higher standard than Broly had expected. He won some tournaments and seemed to have made a name for himself. Of course, he would never compare to the human prodigies of the Z fighters. Still, it was better than most people could ever hope to achieve. After waiting for some time, the two deities appeared to pick up the participants. Goku was very excited, which received him some death glares from Beerus. With breakneck speed, the group headed for the arena in the void. Chapter 232, First Encounter. Just when they reached the edge of the universe, they teleported and in just a blink of an eye they arrived on a giant area with a tall pillar coming out of the middle. Half a circle was revolving around the arena, which was the spectator seats, and a tiny light was illuminating the arena. Amidst the surroundings, this little light was the only thing that seemed real. The light made the dark shaded nebula like matter around the arena visible. The world of void seemed desolate, which was to be expected considering the name it was given. Broly, with his eyes that could see into the very structure of things, was even more puzzled. He could sense that the arena itself was clearly made out of material of the Dragon Ball multiverse, but the void outside was truly not part of the multiverse. These nebula-like matter was some sort of energy, and as Broly tried to see deeper into detail, the information assaulted his brain. As they looked down beneath the arena, only darkness greeted them. To Broly, however, the absence of the light his sight became even clearer, which in turn increased the burden. He couldn't help but stop his prying eyes. Broly looked at the other participants of his universe, namely, Vegeta, Goku, Gohan, Aaliyah, Zangya, Cell, Piccolo, Janemba, and Super Buu. After Broly had heard from Vegeta, who the other participants were, Broly had quickly replaced two from the list with Buu and Janemba. He was certain they would be a greater assistance than the original choice of Raditz and Bardock, especially considering their weird abilities. One with a seemingly omnipotent regeneration, the other with space manipulation, and both had high strength to boot. They were highly unpredictable variables for the other universes, and since they do whatever Broly ordered, they were a perfect controllable asset for the team. It was a last-minute change, but Beerus and Whis didn't interfere with the decision after hearing the explanation. Broly gave the commanding rights of the demons to Piccolo, who was announced as their leader. Broly was fine with it as Piccolo was intelligent enough to get the best out of the team members. Gohan now was still too young to be the leader. Of course, he himself would do his own thing, as would Vegeta and Goku with their personality. The other warriors slowly appeared while Whis was explaining the surroundings. For example, the inability to fly, and that they would be teleported to the spectator seats if they were knocked off the ring. Broly had seen the teleportation mechanism beneath the arena, as well as the restrictions in the air. If he forced it, he could probably go around the mechanism, but that would be too high profile, especially considering that the two Omni Kings was present. After explaining this, Whis, Beerus, and the universe's 7 Kais flew towards their spectator seats, while the other participants of the different universes appeared one at a time. Broly looked around to see if there was some difference to the ones present and the ones he saw in the series, but unfortunately, there was not much difference. Broly already knew who the aces of the teams were, but there were only few people Broly looked forward to fight against, and that included his disciples. The rest of the warriors were only cannon fodder in his eyes, merely here to fill in the gaps. Of course, this was only of the perspective of Broly, Universe's 7th uncrowned king. Broly looked towards Universe 10 spectator seats, but he couldn't find Zamasu. He already had been told about it by Vegeta and Goku, but he couldn't help but turn towards Piccolo and ask again, were there really warriors from the future during the time I was away? Piccolo looked at him for a second before telling him about the events of Goku Black, which was quite the shock to Broly. Man, I truly missed all that. I thought I could see it in real life. Broly was disappointed, but he didn't dwell long on it. Piccolo only looked at him confused. What does he mean by real life? While Broly looked around, he saw Goku greet Universe 6. There was one additional Saiyan, which should be Kaba. Surprisingly, this version had some scars on his body and didn't seem to be as malnourished as in the series. He wasn't super muscular, but his arms weren't twigs either. Kaba and Vegeta obviously didn't have a master-disciple relationship, and Kaba seemed to be at odds with Broly's disciples. Maybe they fought on different sides in the Civil War. Broly thought as he went to them and greeted them as well. Suddenly, an intimidating aura gushed out from a blinding light that indicated the arrival of another universe. After the group revealed themselves in their black and red uniforms, Goku stepped forward to greet Toppo. Obviously, the man of justice wasn't pleased to be acquainted with Goku. It was only a few days ago, when the preliminary matches of Xeno's exhibition match took place, and Toppo still held some resentment towards Goku, who had got this tournament rolling. During the exhibition match, Goku, Gohan, and Zangya had fought against Universe 9. The only reason why they didn't ask Broly to participate was because of his status as the strongest. They wanted to keep him, Universe 7's trump card, hidden. Broly followed Goku towards Universe 11. He just couldn't help but look at them close up. Jiren was obviously turned with his back towards them, giving the greeters the cold shoulder, while Toppo and Goku had a little conversation. I have no interest in personal squabbles. Toppo shouted as he waved his arm. But we gonna fight anyways? Goku responded. We will deal with it at that time. Toppo shouted, or was it just his normal talking voice? Broly couldn't tell. Goku peeked at Jiren, who was positioned behind Toppo further back. Goku called out to him as he thought Jiren looked strong. Say, you dash. Get lost. Jiren coldly interrupted Goku from behind his back. Only after Jiren said something did Goku notice his presence. When did you? Goku was shocked and quickly turned around, only to see that he wasn't even paying attention to him anymore. Jiren looked at Broly, who pointed his fingertips towards Jiren's neck. I really don't like being sneaked up on. Broly coldly said as his fingers seemed incomparable sharp, as if it would cut right through Jiren's neck. They interlocked eyes with each other, and the atmosphere became increasingly tense. Both weren't willing to give in. Elias suddenly called out to Broly and led him away, preventing a fight to break out even before the tournament started. Jiren followed Broly's back with squinted eyes. This one is very dangerous, he said out loud, surprising the other Pride troopers. They couldn't believe that Jiren had acknowledged someone as dangerous. Even Toppo wasn't evaluated this highly. Toppo wanted to rebuke him as he seen the fight of Broly against Hit on GodTube. That last attack of Broly was impressive, but also left him completely exhausted. Toppo didn't think that Broly was as dangerous to be seen that way by Jiren, but he also knew that he wasn't in a position to doubt Jiren's judgment in terms of speculating someone's strength. The other gods of destruction then sped up the construction of the arena. Everyone had to dodge the flying blocks, except for Jiren, who saw through the movements of them and just let them fly past him. There was another who didn't dodge a block and was being watched by Jiren. Broly didn't even look at the block, who directly headed for him, and it was clear that it would hit Broly. Boom! As everyone expected, the block directly collided with Broly, and it was instantly pulverized. Broly stood there without a scratch, even though he just had a collision with one of the hardest materials in the multiverse, Kachikachin. Broly coldly returned Jiren's gaze before he looked towards the gods of destruction and calmly threatened them as he brushed off the dust on his shoulder. Watch what you are doing, construction workers. Everyone was speechless. Even Jiren was surprised by Broly's boldness. They stared at him, but Broly was already used to the stares of the gods. After all, Whis and Beerus had constantly sneaked glances at him after they had met since his body reconstruction. Fortunately, the silence was being dispersed by the Grand Priest's announcement of the completion of the fighting stage. The Grand Priest then went on to introduce the universes and then handed off the speech to Lord Zeno and his timeline twin. Everybody, thanks for coming. We've been really looking forward to this. Everybody, make it exciting for us. The two Zenos called out. Thank you for those wonderful words. The Grand Priest thanked them and then went on to explain the rules of Tournament of Power. Chapter 233, Tournament of Power. Right above the pillar and beneath Lord Zeno's spectator seats, the Grand Priest stood on a small platform, recounting the rules of this tournament. The time limit was 48 minutes, and with it the pillar in the middle will get lowered to indicate the progress. Weapons that aren't techniques as well as killing was forbidden. Broly slapped the unresponsive Janemba at the back of his head. Janemba instantly knew what his master wanted, and stored his sword in his pocket dimension. Further rules were the only disqualification rule. One had to be thrown off the stage to be disqualified. It didn't matter if a participant was knocked out as long as he was still on the stage. Techniques to fly cannot be used, of course. Beings that could naturally fly were exempt from this restriction. The last rule was that healing items were completely forbidden. The Grand Priest wanted to close the introduction with this, but a hand was raised amongst the warriors of Universe 7. "What is your question, Broly?" the Grand Priest asked with a surprised look. The rules were simple, and he didn't expect for anyone to have a question. "You said killing is forbidden, but what if the contestant was knocked off the stage first before he died?" The Grand Priest thought for a second before answering. "All the contestants will be treated by their respective angel. If they were knocked off and still succumbed to their wounds, it would be the angel's fault." "Oh, I see. Understandable," Broly said, seemingly innocent as he smiled slightly. His team members, however, couldn't help but shiver at his innocent response. The other warriors were also irked by the question he asked. Goku put a hand on Broly's shoulder before whispering, "Hey, Broly, could you hold back a little?" Broly looked at Goku's hand on his shoulder before brushing it off. "All right. I intended to watch until the cannon fodders were eliminated anyway." "Thanks." Goku gave Broly a thumbs up before looking through the ranks of the other warriors. "Are there any other questions?" The Grand Priest waited for a moment, and then went to ask Lord Zeno if it was all right to start the tournament. The two Zenos couldn't keep their excitement to themselves and urged the Grand Priest to announce the start. The Grand Priest bowed slightly to the two Zenos and then turned towards the participants. "And now, warriors of each universe, prepare yourselves." It turned into a moment of silence as the atmosphere became increasingly tense. Almost everyone took in a battle stance to prepare for the incoming battle. "Let the tournament of power begin." As soon as the Grand Priest's voice fell and his hand swung down, numerous warriors of the different universes began to dash towards their first opponent they had chosen. While almost everyone immediately fell into combat, Jiren's opponents were intimidated by his mere glance and backed off voluntarily. The same went for Broly, who had a menacing smile on his face as soon as the tournament started. He looked like he couldn't wait to start a massacre, even though he was just excited to watch some fights. Unlike in the series, Universe 7's team was more united. The only ones who carried out their own things were Broly, Vegeta, Goku. Janemba and Bu listened to every command from Piccolo, while Cell was barely disciplined enough through his service in Broly's army. The other 17 members stood in a circle and protected each other from any ambushes. Their individual strength was impressive, and with Piccolo as the head, their combined effort quickly fended off any challenger that appeared. Broly ignored the chaos that quickly arrived at the start of the tournament and headed towards the pillar in the middle. He strolled through the battlefield like it was his backyard, while all kinds of techniques devastated the surroundings. There were nearly no pauses between explosions as shouts of struggle sounded out all across the field. Broly quickly reached the pillar and jumped to the top. He sat down with his legs dangling over the edge, while his gaze swept across the battlefield. He was shocked as he realized that after not even a minute, 2 participants were knocked off the stage. One was even thrown off by Goku. Goku was now preoccupied with the trio of danger. Cell lost himself in bullying an inferior being. Vegeta was pummeling some poor contestants into the ground, while the rest of the team was sticking to their defensive plan. Super Bu was a great distraction for most of the threats as his opponents tried their best to inflict some damage, but he just kept generating or moved his body around like liquid. Janemba was also appraised highly by the others as he traveled through his pocket dimension and beat up the incoming challengers. The gods of destruction of the other universes had their attention drawn to Universe 7, as were the attention of the other contestants. Unknowingly, they all considered Universe 7 as the biggest threat with their weird and powerful team members. Piccolo was busy with commanding the others, while holding off some warriors with his long arms. Vegeta unexpectedly gave Goku a hand in fighting the trio wolves, while the others were surrounded by more than a dozen of warriors. However, as united as they were, they had no problem in defending against all of them at the same time. Their strength was higher than most of the participants, and their teamwork was rather decent. It was more than enough to take on full teams of weaker universes. Broly watched unhappily as he looked at Vegeta and Goku completely decimating Universe 9's entire team. In just 3 minutes, they knocked all of them down. After being announced that all fighters of Universe 9 were defeated, Lord Zeno swiftly erased Universe 9 without batting an eyelash. The whole battlefield became silent for the first time since the start of this tournament. They all only woke up when they realized the harsh truth of what happened. They now internalized that their loss had truly had consequences. The battle soon resumed, while Broly was still watching leisurely. There were some that approached him, but they were slapped away by an invisible force not even 10 meters off the ground. Suddenly, another presence looked at him from afar. Broly looked to his left, deep into the battlefield, and saw Jiren, surrounded by some other Pride troopers, watching him with an intense glare. "Don't look at me with your puppy eyes. Sit and enjoy the show. You should know that it would be unwise for us to fight already." Broly reached out to him with telepathy. Jiren remained silent for a few seconds, before he finally responded, This only applies if you are strong enough to make me exhausted. What a bluffer, Broly thought as he rolled his eyes. He turned away from Jiren and looked at his disciples, who were already rampaging in the midst of some other universe's team. Kale, with her legendary state, was easily able to defeat almost every opponent thrown to her. Caulifla was also a lot stronger than her counterpart in the series and was going through the other warriors with ease. They were also attracting a lot of attention of the other universes. Even Jiren looked over to watch them for a moment. Until now, Jiren had not once entered his meditation. It seemed like he was cautious to not let his guard down, which was quite surprising as Jiren was rather prideful and arrogant. Toppo, next to Jiren, was loudly shouting out his justice skills and bombarded the other contestants. Just as Broly glanced over the other warriors that weren't as interesting to watch, someone arrived next to him. Broly turned around to see who it was. "Hey, Master." He was cheerfully greeted by Kale with a wave of her hand. She was constantly in her legendary state, as she could keep it up almost indefinitely. Broly raised an eyebrow as he saw her walk to the edge, not far away from him. Her ki peaked and her body was enveloped by a dark green light until it converged into spheres. "Seriously?" Broly asked as he jumped down the pillar, barely escaping the onslaught of ki attacks that were thrown into every direction. The surface of the stage was quickly blown up. Many were caught off by that, and were quickly thrown off the stage as a result. Universe 7 still had yet to suffer any losses, but Piccolo was already exhausted from multitasking. To elevate the pressure, the Saiyans powered up one at a time, but still keeping enough energy to last the whole tournament. No one was able to get through their defense until the chaos caused by Kale's attack. Several Pride Troopers took this chance to divide them further up. Chapter 234, Ultra Instinct. Several Pride Troopers surrounded Piccolo, Aaliyah, and Zangya, while Cell, Bu, and Janemba were attacked by other universes. The two demons shouldn't cooperate too well now since Piccolo and Broly were out of reach to command them. Fortunately, the two weren't mindless drones either. Seeing that they were separated, they started to work with Cell in order to defend against the challengers. With their weird abilities and Cell being an all-rounder, they were able to hold on. The others that were surrounded by the Pride Troopers were having a lot more trouble. Their enemies weren't to be underestimated. Universe 11 had high-standard warriors and put immense pressure on Universe 7. Fortunately, Universe 6 with their ace hit and the two female Saiyans butted in the fight. Kale's humongous amount of ki and her physical strength easily overpowered many of the Pride Troopers. Unlike her counterpart, she had full control of her transformation, which made her a terrifying opponent to fight against. Caulifla, as a Saiyan genius, showed her might as a Super Saiyan 3 and decimated her enemies as well. For a short moment, the twin universe, 6 and 7, worked together as they threw off several Pride Troopers. The Love Universe 2 showed their fangs as well. Although they proclaimed every action of them to be out of love, their strength and destructive force was devastating. With only 50 warriors left on the battlefield, many stronger contestants revealed their strength. The Saiyans of Universe 7 had to go Saiyan God as they were bombarded with attacks. They were still the only universe left that had yet to take casualties. The trio Aaliyah, Zangya, and Piccolo were getting a breather after Universe 6 helped them a bit, but Cell and the two demons were still heavily under attack. Broly skipped through the battlefield as he looked at the high-level fights happening all over the place. There was so much going on that he could barely take everything in, which made him use his perfect state to remain guarded to unexpected strong warriors. This seemed to have been the right call. Suddenly, Broly abruptly stopped moving, and a ki blast blew up the ground in front of him. He turned his head to see Universe 11's Dispo, who looked at Broly with a smug expression. "Seems like you can at least dodge, but I'm not convinced that you are any threat to Jiren." He directly stepped forward as soon as his voice fell and headed towards Broly. Broly leisurely bobbed and weaved as he avoided Dispo's attack. The more he attacked, the more shocked Dispo became. The one thing he was confident about was his speed, but now he couldn't even touch a hair of this Saiyan. Broly smirked, which instantly triggered Dispo to go full speed. Just as he flexed his legs in an attempt to burst out with full speed, his perspective changed. The world rapidly turned, confusing the Blitz captain of the Pride Troopers. Only after he bounced across the ground several times did he feel the pain in his stomach. He quickly reorganized himself and tried to stop himself from flying further. However, before he could stop, he sensed that his life was threatened and immediately stomped the ground, accelerating his fly. He heavily crashed into a pile of rocks. He looked back at the spot where he just felt the threat, only to see Broly with his arm deeply embedded into the ground. Broly didn't stop for long as he yanked out his arm and quickly followed the escaping Dispo. Dispo imagined a red glow in Broly's eyes as the Saiyan seemingly thirsted for his blood. He began to panic and quickly moved away as quick as he could. Before he could comprehend where he was going, he bumped into the fat chick from the Love Universe. He practically bounced off her body and collided with a large boulder. Ribrian turned around and directly engaged in a fight with Dispo, who intended to flee, but was quickly stopped by her. Fortunately for him, Broly had stopped his pursuit, who instead took a stroll across the battlefield. As he walked across the battlefield, he saw Zangya engage with a fight with Hit. It seemed like she wanted to have a rematch with him. This time her threads covered a larger area and even affected other contestants and drained some of their energy. Aaliyah and Piccolo were nowhere to be seen. He quickly jumped up and looked around only to be targeted by several key blasts that he slapped away. He then saw Bu and Cell on the spectator seats. He was surprised that they were knocked out and followed their line of sight only to be greeted by Hit knocking Zangya off the stage. He already took 3 of us down? At least, he seemed to be somewhat exhausted. Broly turned to find the others, while casually knocking some contestants that appeared before him out of his way. Of course, as he was fairly in the middle of the stage, he barely knocked someone off the stage, but the injuries would impact their fighting abilities considerably. He wanted to find the others as he considered about having a fallback plan. Although he was confident in his strength, Jiren was still an unknown variable. He saw that Goku needed Mastered Ultra Instinct to fight equally with Jiren. Broly wasn't aware how much stronger one could get with Mastered Ultra Instinct, but it had to be a significant boost. Suddenly, the stage was illuminated by a bluish light. Broly turned around and saw energy gathering towards a sphere above Goku. He then heard Goku's plead for energy. Might as well. Broly raised an arm as he let his energy flow towards Goku's Genkidama. He knew that it would only take a minute tops to generate the energy that he had just given. It took only a few moments until the spirit bomb grew significantly. Goku then threw it towards Jiren, who only raised an arm to meet it. Broly instantly got hyped and directly went to the pillar in the middle and jumped on it. He just made it in time to see a sky-breaking explosion, casting a blue hue on the stage and the void itself. Nothing unexpected happened as Goku failed to crush Jiren with his spirit bomb and was sucked into it instead. Broly watched closely as he observed every changes in Goku's body. Since his construction of his body, he had gained some insights into Ultra Instinct and now wanted to confirm this new knowledge. Goku fell into his own attack, while he grimaced as he resisted its force. The energy that is used to create the spirit bomb was filtered and incredibly pure as a result. As soon as he touched the core of the spirit bomb, this pure energy exploded outwards. In that instant, Broly felt Goku's soul energy burst out, which then guided the energy to be absorbed by Goku's body. Broly didn't know what he should think about what he was seeing. Goku, in a near unconscious state, triggered his own soul and forcefully absorbed the pure energy into himself. He evaded an instant death through the Genkidama's energy by accidentally absorbing it. The thread between life and death was so thin that his survival chance was less than 1 in a billion. The way his soul guided the energy couldn't diverge in the slightest, or else he would be dead. Broly unconsciously looked at the 2 Xenos. He couldn't help but shiver as he saw one of them glance back at him for a second. Maybe it was just a coincidence, but Broly quickly turned away and suppressed the unease in his heart. He focused on Goku again and tried to learn as much as he could. With the absorption of the energy, Goku's soul was more active than ever. He stood up in the crater and emitted a tremendous amount of heat. Broly could see that his whole soul was actually burning away his body's energy, which end product was released outwards in the form of heat. The soul was burning a lot of energy to maintain the state Goku had just entered. It established a link with his own body and enveloped it in a bluish, colorful light. Broly knew that with this, any external stimuli would be instantly transferred to his soul and enabled instant reaction. This was also the thing that he wanted to confirm. With his body being created through his soul, he didn't need the amount of energy Goku needed right now to establish that link. Instantaneously, reaction was now inherent to him. This was also the reason why Goku didn't transform. His soul was using up all his energy to maintain this state. So how could he have more to transform into a Super Saiyan? He was already using all his strength already. Broly could react to everything instantaneously as well. However, the question for him was if he could move fast enough to avoid it. Every threat that headed for one's body would be instantly registered by him through basically a sixth sense, and could be effectively be dealt with if one was fast enough. Now the next question was, what was Mastered Ultra Instinct? What was beyond reacting instantaneously? Obviously, the next step was to predict the future. As he thought about it, Broly began to smile. With Goku as a specimen to observe, he knew that he wasn't mistaken about his future path. He could finally proceed and tread deeper into the realm of Ultra Instinct. Chapter 235. You could have one. Broly watched as Goku and Jiren had their little fight until Goku couldn't maintain this state any longer. Jiren didn't put Goku into his eyes even after witnessing the immense growth of strength and speed of Goku. He didn't even feel the need to knock Goku out as he was already defeated. From this little fight and through what he had seen in the series, Broly could already tell how Goku managed to achieve Mastered Ultra Instinct. Even though Goku's soul was burning up the energy inside his body, the resulted heat was energy as well. If he could maintain the heat inside and use it as another energy source and break it down even further, he would have excess energy to be handled. His soul would be pushed to the next level, and he could forcefully enter Mastered Ultra Instinct. This was also the exact reason Why Goku couldn't enter this state afterwards, as he had mentioned to Vegeta while training. His soul had guided the energy he received on its own, establishing that link. Even when he sucked the heat back in for his own use, it was merely his fighting instincts that allowed him to do so. It was similar on how he entered Super Saiyan for the first time. It wasn't because he knew about this feeling on his back, it was merely his instincts, his emotions that led him to success. However, Ultra Instinct was far more difficult to achieve than Super Saiyan. He needed the knowledge on how exactly he did it, otherwise it would not be certain if he could enter this state again. Of course, with his fighting instincts, he would probably only need to train for a few tens of years to achieve it. Broly himself had only entered it by accident and went on from there. Now with his new body, his training period was skipped. This wasn't necessarily a good thing, neither was it bad. It would depend on his own effort, but more importantly opportunities in form of pressure. Maybe he could get some insights in how time flows and how every minor thing could affect or threaten him, but how long would that take? Indeed, it would build him a good foundation, but it would take dozens of years. How old was he? He was just in his late 20s. How could he train as long as he lived just to achieve something that would just take a couple of hard-fought battles? After Piccolo attended Goku and gave him some energy, they tried to stay low-key, so Goku could recover. Broly stood up from his seat on the middle pillar and let out a deep roar. The force behind his voice sent ripples through the air, and the ground shook as a result. In just an instant, he got the attention of every single warrior of the different universes. Even his own universe was not spared of confusion. I saw some interesting battles, but I have to say I am still quite disappointed. Broly spoke out with great vigor. Why is he saying that? The two Xenos asked out with their voices overlapping. Broly didn't let the warriors wait as he continued. Your strength would probably top-notch in every universe, but there is just too much difference between me and you. Broly said as he looked down at them. No. Shut up. You will provoke everyone to attack you. Beerus shouted out anxiously as he was almost jumping over the edge. Wish chuckled slightly. Ho ho ho. I think that is his intention. Beerus gritted his teeth as he was well aware of Broly's arrogance. You idiot. You will be the doom of us all. Beerus slumped down strengthless. Maybe you could win if all the universes had come at me at once. However, you already blasted your chance. Broly said while exaggerated, shaking his head in disapproval. Presumptuous. Arrogant rascal. Numerous curses rang out as some of the aces approached Broly. Although they cursed him as arrogant, everyone took him seriously. Several members of Universe 3 unexpectedly fused together right off the bat and formed a giant robot called Analyza. Ribrian of Universe 2 proclaimed that she would teach Broly a lesson in the name of love, which weirded Broly out. Of course, Hit, Kale, and Caulifla from Universe 6 stepped forward. Topo stepped forward as well but was stopped by Jiren. I will handle him. Focus on the other members of his universe. Jiren said with unwavering authority that let Topo's complaints stuck in his throat. He looked deeply at Jiren's back while moving towards Broly and couldn't help but be astonished. Jiren was serious. Even that sudden increase of Goku's strength didn't faze him as much. Topo then went on and searched for the other members of Universe 7. There were others who wanted to participate, but their gods of destruction advised them otherwise. Although they were reluctant to admit that they were weaker, they could only stay quiet and wait their fight out and eliminate whoever was left standing. There wasn't much glory to it, but they were fighting for the survival of their entire universe. What is a little bit of honor and pride in comparison? Universe 6, 7, and 11 had the strongest participants of this tournament. Maybe it would be different if Universe 1, 5, 8, and 12 weren't exempted to attend this tournament, but Broly didn't believe that they would be a lot stronger if there were any stronger individuals. The mortal level, after all, didn't only look at the power levels of the mortals. In fact, strength was just a minor criterion. Broly jumped down the pillar and waited for his guests to come closer. Broly opened his arms wide as he wanted a hug and started speaking in a strong and imposing tone. Should have kept your mouth shut? Caulifla said, sniggering. You think 6-on-1 will do you any good? Do you really think you have enough power to beat me? The 6 warriors surrounded him in a semicircle. Suddenly Ribrian moved out first and sent out heart-shaped energy attacks towards Broly. Broly didn't hesitate and charged right at her while bulldozing through her attacks. In his sprint, Hit popped up from the side and tried to strike him, but Broly evaded him as he dashed towards Ribrian. I will take out the trash first. Broly shouted as he evaded his disciples and arrived in front of Ribrian, who had suddenly turned into a giant through the cheering of her teammates. She punched out with her giant fist, but Broly met it with a punch of his own, directly blasting Ribrian's hand into thousands of light particles. Broly immediately followed up by giving her a hard kick to her face. Her giant body was lifted off the ground and headed for the edge of the stage. Her large body disintegrated slowly as her original body flew out of the projection's head. At breakneck speed, she was flung to the void with no one able to rescue her. As the ace of her team, the other members were downcast, but with Ribrian showing her support and trust to them, They regained their will to fight and even showed more vigor in their attacks. Analaza had taken action as well as he shot out several large beams at Broly, but he quickly evaded it. Jiren had yet to move, but his ki was building with every second. He looked like he could burst out with humongous strength every second now. However, he seemed to wait for something. The others had sensed something as well. Although they had attacked, they were only feeling him out right now. Broly stood tall on a large boulder as he let his gaze sweep across his challengers. He smiled as his ki started rising rapidly. A crack on the boulder Broly was standing on started cracking form his feet down until it reached the ground. Afterwards the ground beneath the boulder started cracking, and it seemingly extended all the way to the ground. With a burst of power and a bright red light, Broly was enveloped by ki as it shot up into new heights. His ki was like a beacon in this void, illuminating the darkness. His challengers clenched their fists hard as they looked at Broly completing his transformation. Chapter 236, Broly vs. Aces. Broly's ki reached into the void in a form of a fire pillar. The power put all the warriors and gods equally in awe. Spectators that weren't erased yet felt the intimidating aura emitted by Broly. Analaza, the giant fused robot, couldn't wait any longer and opened his mouth. Large amount of energy gathered into a form of a sphere before it shot towards Broly, who was still mid-transformation. Analaza's energy wave instantly collided with the flaming pillar. Unexpectedly, the pillar of ki still soared into the void unaffected. Aloof and untouched the pillar remained as the power of the energy wave slowly diminished. The mere emittance of Broly's ki was enough to withstand this powerful attack that was capable of destroying a universe. Kale and Caulifla looked at each other after witnessing what happened. I don't think that we will be able to defeat him with our current power, Caulifla said solemnly. Kale nodded and took something out of her pocket. It seems we don't have another choice. Indeed. Caulifla pulled out another Patera earring and quickly put it on. Kale followed suit. As soon as they put on the earrings, the resultant attraction force pulled their bodies together before they merged in a blinding light. A moment later, a figure emerged from the light. All right, show us what you got, Broly. Kefla's voice echoed across the battlefield. Only some of the present people looked at their action as the attention was mostly on Broly's overwhelming display of power. Kappa was anxious when he saw Broly transforming. Seeing the two strongest Saiyans of Universe 6 pull out the Patera, he calmed down significantly. He knew of their effect and the fused person would be considerably stronger than each fusee, but he didn't know if even that was enough. Belmod, the god of destruction of Universe 11, was frowning as well, but he was still confident in his ace, Jiren. He and the other gods still thought of the same thing. They were happy that Broly had attracted the attention of all the aces of the universes. If it was their own ace alone, they wouldn't know if that was enough, but with Jiren, Hit, Kefla, and Analaza working together, their victory was guaranteed. They all got ready as they saw the red light converge back to the shadowy figure in the middle. The light retracted to his body and formed a red layer on his skin, not revealing anything beneath it. Those with extraordinary sight were able to tell that Broly slightly grew in size and his hair grew longer to the middle of his back, but even they couldn't see anything beneath the red layer. A moment of complete silence was shrouding the battlefield until the red light broke of Broly's skin and turned into light particles, dispersing in the wind. Broly's body now was revealed to the world. All present Saiyans were puzzled as they saw Broly's mostly red fur that covered his back, arms, and the side of his torso. Around his eye was a thin red line in the same red of his fur. The muscles on Broly seemed like metal wires that were shaping his body, and even the fur looked threatening. It was like every strand of hair together formed an impenetrable armor. A long red tail extended out of Broly's red sash and swayed slightly in the wind. When Broly had reconstructed his body, he had dismissed the tail as it wasn't the source of his Saiyan power anymore. Now after transforming into Super Saiyan 4, a tail had grown anew. Broly gave off a savage, wild and unbound aura as if he would go on a rampage in the next moment. When the present beings looked at his eyes, however, a chill went down their spine. His pupils were still gray-silvery and portrayed an everlasting calm. It seemed to pierce their body straight into their soul with every secret being exposed. It was a stark contrast to his otherwise savage appearance, which made Broly even more intimidating. Broly's fur wasn't completely red. There were several white hairs that formed lines in between the otherwise fire-like fur. These lines were like veins that ran over his fur. However, when others tried to look at them more closely, they seemed to disappear as if they were just an illusion. "Are you done staring at me?" Broly's voice sounded out, which awoke the aces that wanted to fight against him. The giant robot seemed to get mad as he directly charged towards Broly. Analaza stomped on Broly. Deep crack extended into the pillar. But Analaza seemed dissatisfied as he didn't feel any resistance. The robot raised his feet. Of course, nothing was to be seen other than some crushed rubble. Jiren was the first to look above Analaza. Kefla and Hit were noticing something as well and looked at Broly, who was slowly falling above Analaza with both of his hands intertwined. Analaza finally felt something as well and looked up only to be greeted with Broly striking him in the face. Analaza's face was directly hammered through the pillar and into the ground. His body was embedded deep into the ground with cracks covering the near 100 meters around the robot. Broly wordlessly grabbed Analaza's ankle and pulled him out of the ground before throwing him to the edge of the stage. Unfortunately, Analaza quickly recovered and pierced his arms deep into the ground and stopped himself from being disqualified. A long trail of two deep trenched on the stage were formed. Analaza barely stopped at the edge, and with his wings quickly flew in the sky. He didn't do anything after being taught a lesson in that single exchange. He didn't dare to act rash again. Hit and Kefla moved out after Broly had flung Analaza away. Their cooperation was seamless as they headed towards him from two directions. Although they had taken the initiative, Broly was a step faster than them. He met them mid-flight and kicked Hit away and elbowed Kefla in the face. Both were sent flying. Hit crashed into the ground and Kefla stopped herself in the air. She was still getting used to her speed and power. She was confident that once she had warmed up, she would be able to deal with Broly. She charged at him with great fervor. Her punches and kicks were lightning fast. Her technique was seasoned and impeccable. The Civil War had given both of her Fusey plenty experience to grow on. She quickly got a hang on her powers, and her speed increased as a result. Even after getting a hang on her new power, she constantly grew from the fight. Her strength soared as the battle continued. At unforeseeable moments, Hit appeared around Broly to ambush him. Hit didn't hold back and aimed at Broly's vital areas. He had to give it his all, otherwise he would fail again. The only way for him to draw out his own full potential was by assassination. His strikes were precise and vicious. Every attack was lethal, and with Kefla's pressure, his attacks were impossible to block. However, reality is often disappointing. Even with their seamless cooperation and Kefla's increasing power, they weren't able to land a single hand on Broly. He easily dodged all their attacks as if he could see through their every move. His speed and power were always a notch higher than Kefla's. Every move of Hit missed as Broly's body seemingly flowed around them. Even the energy beams that Analaza shot out from afar were easily dodged by Broly. It looked like Broly was bullying some children who had just learned how to walk. After continuing for a while, leaving Hit and Kefla exhausted, Broly moved out for the first time. 2 strikes. Kefla and Hit didn't even perceive the attacks as they were sent crashing across the whole battlefield. After hitting giant boulders respectively, they spewed out some blood and looked like they were about to pass out every second. Kefla looked a lot better than Hit as her body was a lot stronger than his. Nevertheless, they both stood up again and jumped on some elevated boulders. They didn't dare to recklessly attack him in close combat again. Like Analaza, their combat spirit was almost broken. Their confidence had been easily crushed, but they still knew that they had to meddle in, at least from afar. Jiren's eyes flashed after he saw Broly's ruthless attack against Hit and Kefla. He slowly began to walk towards Broly. Chapter 237, Broly vs. Jiren. Broly looked back at Jiren, who was slowly walking towards him. He raised an eyebrow as he noticed Jiren powering up as he walked. "Oh, you are approaching me? Even after seeing my physical strength, instead of running away, you are coming right to me?" Jiren gave off a low snort as he interlocked eyes with Broly. "I can't beat you up without getting closer. Wait, why do I get a déjà vu?" Broly rubbed his chin as he thought before dismissing this line of thinking. He needed to concentrate on the opponent to his front. Now Broly began to walk to his opponent as well. "Come as close as you like, Jiren. It won't make any difference." They both strolled towards each other before they met in the middle, and as soon as they got into range, both moved out. Jiren punched out, and Broly met it with a kick. Broly's kick seemed to have forced Jiren to take a step backwards, but in fact, he distanced himself on purpose to release 100 attacks through his mere glance. Invisible and traceless, that was what it seemed, but Broly was fully aware that there were 2 variants to his glare. One was just a barrier to fend off attacks, and the other is him controlling his ki to fasten his attacks to a degree that they disappear from everyone's sight. Jiren's current attack was the latter, but Broly's Super Saiyan 4, and due to him entering Ultra Instinct, was confident to clash head-on with this attack. Broly and Jiren seemed to stand still merely looking at each other, but in fact they were exchanging hundreds of attacks in an instant. Contrary to their attacks, the aftermath of this exchange was more than clear. Explosions devastated the surroundings, shaking the whole stage. Every warrior on stage, and even those on the spectator seats, felt their battle, even if they weren't observing. The warriors still focused on themselves and moved out to fight against the other universes. Although these 2 were probably the strongest on this stage, it didn't mean the victor of that duel would win the whole tournament. Vegeta had unexpectedly teamed up with Kaba to fight against Toppo, who was slowly considering using his Hakai energy. However, he knew that Vegeta still wasn't going all out, so neither would he. He had to consider the other strong participants. After all, suddenly they sensed something, and the 3 separated immediately. Just an instant passed after they decided to distance themselves, and two flashes came in wrecking the surroundings. Vegeta followed the two flashes with his eyes, and saw that it was Broly and Jiren. He could only grit his teeth, but he wouldn't just lament that he wasn't as strong as they were right now. He will use this Topo guy as a stepping stone. Vegeta concentrated again on the fight ahead and moved out. His blue aura was flickering as if it would change every second. Kaba saw Vegeta and Topo engage in a fight again, but they were increasing the power output by a lot and was therefore unable to keep up with the two. He turned and looked for other opponents. Kefla and Hit tried to follow Jiren and Broly as best as they could, while firing several key blasts at Broly. Kefla was sure that Broly was going to win against Jiren. There was no doubt in her heart. Hit, on the other hand, wanted to wash away his previous failure. However, he didn't share her assessment of Broly being the sure winner. In his eyes, the two were equally terrifying. Jiren and Broly's battle grew increasingly fierce, and both seemed to put tremendous effort in the fight, but both knew that they were still holding back. While they passed several different fighters, Broly diverted several shockwaves towards them to get them injured, or even knock them off the stage. He didn't want to move out personally later and clean them up now instead. Broly thought that the stray energy of them were enough for these cannon fodders. Jiren obviously noticed this, and he was getting furious. It has been a long time since he was looked down upon. He enjoyed a high status in the Pride Troopers, and many knew his name. If they were ignorant about him and dared to go against him, would be crushed, but this Saiyan in front of him. He admitted that Broly was strong, but he should notice that Jiren himself was no pushover. In fact, he still hid a lot of strength, and every decent fighter like Broly would be able to guess this. He was even stronger than the god of destruction of his universe. Yet, this Saiyan still dared to divert his attention. His ki suddenly flared up and a red aura enveloped his body. His strength and speed increased by a notch and directly appeared on Broly's side. "You arrogant Saiyan, your inattention marks your defeat." His kick whipped towards Broly's head at lightning speed. If this dimension in the void wasn't personally created by Lord Zeno, this kick would have sliced apart any other universe and damaged the surrounding ones as well. Broly saw Jiren's kick and directly bend backwards with only his feet to his knees supporting his body weight. The kick brushed his hair slightly, slicing them off. Broly used his hand as a support and spun around, trying to kick Jiren's standing leg away and sent him to the ground, but Jiren quickly evaded it by jumping. Broly saw Jiren land on a boulder, and Broly cracked his neck as he focused back on the main event. Although he could only win if the other participants were knocked off as well, if Jiren was still there would be no way for him to knock them off. Besides, he still got teammates that were cleaning the trash off the stage. As he made up his mind, Broly walked towards Jiren, who, for the first time, prepared himself for the incoming attack. Broly gained momentum as he moved towards Jiren until he was sprinting full power. His body turned into a red line directly heading for Jiren, whose aura was still increasing and growing into the void above. Jiren pushed forward his hand and several red ki blasts shot out immediately. Broly maneuvered between the spheres and arrived in front of Jiren. With all his gained speed and weight behind it, Broly punched out. Jiren's expression changed as he saw that he wasn't able to stop his approach and opted to meet it with a punch himself. His ki had retracted and formed a thin glow on his body. Jiren's arm was strengthened to the current highest degree. However, as he was still a standing target, he was overwhelmed by the power behind Broly's attack. He was sent flying through several boulders and even collided with some other contestants as well, instantly knocking them off the stage. Jiren quickly regained balance and pierced the ground with his feet to slow down his flight. Of course, Broly didn't miss this chance and followed Jiren and was about to chop at Jiren's shoulder when he was suddenly knocked into the air. Broly grew dizzy from the strike to his chin as he heard a low voice. "From now on I am getting serious." Broly quickly backflipped and landed. He wiped off the little blood drop on the corner of his mouth before staring at Jiren, who had yet again increased his strength. It was like Jiren was a bottomless well of power. Jiren saw that Broly was only scratched by that and couldn't help but praise this Saiyan's tough physique in his mind. He was just about to clash with Jiren again as he suddenly felt another presence right behind him. Broly directly turned around to kick the person away, but a fist already landed on Broly's chest. He instantly noticed a force enter his body. "I only needed this one hit. This hit will bind you in a cage of time." Hit spoke out as he poured immense energy into Broly's body, freezing the time in Broly's body and its near periphery. Broly was sent flying and felt his body freeze after he landed. Broly's body was trembling as his head slowly turned towards Hit. It seemed like Hit has used his trump card. However, he was gritting his teeth hard as he felt that he couldn't completely contain Broly in his time cage. "I guess I just have to put all my chips on the table, even though gambling is not very assassin-like," Hit said with conviction filling his eyes. "All or nothing." Just as he was about to move to push Broly off the stage, a figure landed next to Hit. This was, of course, Jiren, who looked at Hit struggle. Jiren's eyes looked at his clenched fist before glaring at the trapped Broly. Chapter 238, a ruse. Jiren glared daggers at Broly, who was struggling against the time cage. Unbelievable. Jiren turned around and scanned the battlefield before he locked onto the broken pillar in the middle. Hit put all his energy into his attack as he pushed Broly to the edge of the stage. He knew he couldn't hold him, but it was possible for him to push him off the stage. Kefla hesitated to help as she couldn't bring herself to push Broly off after being ambushed. Hit knew of the female Saiyans' personality and therefore dismissed her. It would be hampering her motivation and will to fight if she went against her morals and beat Broly, while relying on Hit's ambush. After Hit dismissed her and said that she needed to knock off the other warriors instead of helping, she gave in and flew away to battle others. If it was not Broly, who was in this position, she would have quickly knocked him out already, but she couldn't bear with it when it came to her master. Hit was a lot stronger after the initial encounter with Broly, and now all his strength was put into pushing Broly off the stage. His time ability was manifesting itself in his hand, as he used it to repel Broly. Broly gritted his teeth. Veins bulged on his skin as he tried to break out of time, but his strength was not enough to break out of Hit's ability. However, he still could remain on stage. Hit was getting anxious as he burned everything he has, but it still wasn't enough. Suddenly a key beam passed Hit and directly landed on Broly, rapidly pushing him to the edge of the stage. Unexpectedly, at this crucial moment Analyza had finally decided to give a hand. Broly was giving his all as his eyes were bloodshot, and the key broke parts of the time cage. His feet were deeply embedded in the ground, but it couldn't stop his momentum in the slightest. He sensed the edge coming closer, and he visibly began to panic. "I will not fall here." Broly roared as his key burned fiercely, breaking apart the time cage, while pushing away Analyza's beam. Just as he was about to fend off the attacks, some cannon fodder that were hit by Broly and Jiren's battle joined the fray and attacked Broly. The edge of the stage trembled as it broke apart due to the onslaught of attacks before finally crumbling apart completely. With no ground to support him, Broly's body shot into the lower void. Broly was seen trying to use the debris to jump up the stage again, but the attacks didn't stop and pushed him into the void until he disappeared. Hit fell on his knees as he had completely exhausted himself in that exchange, but he couldn't rest as the other warriors were already heading his way. Kefla was already engaging Analyza. However, the two were equal in strength and Kefla could therefore spend no attention to the others that headed for Hit. Why isn't Broly in the spectator seats? No one knew who asked it, but as they looked towards Universe 7 spectator seats, he was nowhere to be seen. The other mortals on the seats had deep frowns on their face. Only a god of destruction and an angel were smiling brightly. Universe 3's, Saiyans and 11's gods of destruction were looking puzzled at Beerus, who suddenly laughed out loud. Their angel had a neutral look. No one could tell what they were thinking. Every other god gave Beerus a knowing look before they looked on the battlefield again. Only Beerus' roaring laughter and Wish chuckling could be heard until Jiren spoke out through his teeth. "That can't be. Strength is justice. Strength is absolute. I won't lose against you. All is meaningless without victory. To be defeated is to lose everything." Just like then, Jiren seemed to go through a flashback as he halted his speech for a second. "I won't go through that again. No matter what you throw at me, illusions or other schemes, I will smash it apart with my strength." Jiren's ki suddenly exploded outwards into a raging flame covering almost the complete remaining stage. His muscles grew in size, completely tearing apart his suit that covered his upper body. A strange red glow appeared around his body. This symbolized him using his soul to boost his strength even further. He had broken through his mortal body and was now able to use his soul to reach further heights. The shockwave of him releasing his aura pushed all those with trivial strength off the stage. Hit couldn't resist at all either as he was drained of his energy. The only participants left were Kefla, Analyza, Vegeta, and Goku. The others of Universe 7 had long been knocked off by Toppo's rampage after he used his Hakai energy. They had used all their combined effort and it still was Vegeta, who broke through to Super Saiyan God beyond to knock Toppo off the stage. Following Jiren's glare to the middle pillar, one was able to see a figure sitting leisurely on a broken piece of pillar. Broly was dangling his legs as he watched Jiren with interest. Kappa, Belmod, Moscow, and their participants were shocked into silence. They seemed to finally understand what was going on the whole time. Broly smiled as he enjoyed the reactions of those around him. The flaming pillar and the immense ki that was leaked when he transformed was just a diversion. He had already mastered Super Saiyan 4 when he had battled Hit in the tournament against Universe 6. He wouldn't need to make such a commotion for a transformation that he had already mastered long ago, even before he had reconstructed his body. Due to his violent ki, he had always put effort to control his ki, and if he wanted to, no one would be able to react, much less attack him, while he was transforming. Furthermore, due to his body perfectly supporting his soul-based illusion had reached a deeper level and even God of Destruction would fall trapped to it. He now was able to use a part of his energy to create an image that was no different to himself in the eyes of others. In some sense, they were fighting him for real, even though it was only part of his energy. Of course, he couldn't fool every god at the same time. So he focused on the ones that still had participants in the tournament. The ones that only watched would obviously not say anything as it didn't affect them if either side won or not. Broly had taken his time to lay out his illusion and used such a grand transformation to cover it up, and in the end only Jiren, who increased his strength as he exchanged fists with Broly's illusion, was able to tell that something was off. Broly patted the dust off his knees as he stood up and looked at Jiren, who had broken his limit and even used his soul to reach new heights. Now his illusions would be trivial in front of the current Jiren. The gods of destruction had failed to realize that even they were trapped in an illusion. One had to say that they were suppressing their power, so it was easier for them to be fooled. Only the angels were fully aware from the beginning what was going on. Of course, this included Lord Zeno. Although he seemed like a weak child, he was still the Omni King. His eyes wouldn't easily be clouded by illusions of that degree. Broly put up his hand and several ki blasts shot out high in the sky before homing on Kefla and Analyza. They were stunned by the sudden attack, but quickly counterattacked with all their might. Their attacks didn't last more than a few seconds before they were obliterated. They tried to push against the attack, but were easily carried out of the arena into the void with no suspense. With that, all of Universe Six's participants were knocked off. Beerus had long ago stopped laughing and had a little brother moment with Kampa, but Broly didn't pay attention to that. He had watched Jiren's fight with his illusion and couldn't help but praise his fine ki control. There was no doubt that Jiren was the strongest that Broly had ever fought. Even most gods of destruction weren't able to defeat Jiren with certainty. A mortal that had reached such a height was unusual to say the least. Broly stretched a bit as he hadn't moved his body since transforming. Jiren didn't wait for him to finish and directly dashed towards Broly and punched out. Chapter 239, Abuse. Broly skipped backwards as he evaded Jiren's attacks. One was moving forward relentlessly attacking, while the other was dodging and blocking the attacks during his backtracking. Jiren was going in overdrive as he was depleting his energy at a rapid pace, but he was still unable to overpower Broly. Just as Broly caught Jiren's fist, Jiren's ki converged in his fist before it instantly erupted in an explosion without giving Broly time to react. Broly was forced backwards as he slid across the ground. However, he was still calm as ever, as if he wasn't directly hit by an attack of a warrior of high caliber. Even his hand that had caught Jiren's fist seemed completely fine. Jiren, on the other hand, was using a lot of energy and couldn't extend this fight for the rest of the tournament. He raised his ki and pushed himself as far as he could to end Broly as quickly as he could. After all, there were still other warriors of Universe 7 still on the battlefield. Broly was not surprised as he sensed Vegeta and Goku move towards Jiren, wanting to participate in the fight. They both rushed past Broly and headed for Jiren. Goku as a Super Saiyan God Kaioken times 20, while Vegeta rushed at Jiren as a Super Saiyan God Beyond. Out of my way, weaklings. Jiren raised his hand and directly sent out dozens of ki blasts in an instant. They slapped a few away but were quickly overwhelmed by the strength that resided in each blast. After being hit a couple of times, their smoking bodies were thrown to the side as they reverted back to their base form. It was no surprise that they were knocked out instantly. Jiren wasn't playing anymore. He didn't care who it was. He was going all out now. Even Broly was unwilling to confront these blasts head-on and dodge them instead. This is your end, Broly. Jiren gathered lots of energy and shot a flaming ki beam towards Broly. Like a snake, it followed the dodging Broly across the battlefield. Jiren pushed his energy to the max and boosted the speed of his ki beam to its limit, directly catching up with Broly's rapidly moving body. Bang! The collision resulted in a gigantic explosion. Jiren took deep breaths as he observed every minute movement on the area Broly was blasted into. The stage was already a mess to say the least. There were no pieces larger than a quarter of the initial stage left floating around. As the dust of the explosion Broly was caught into was slowly setting down, a red glow could be seen. A ki sphere around Broly's unharmed body was revealed. Broly laughed. What was that supposed to be, Jiren? Broly didn't give Jiren time to be shocked as he shot towards Jiren. Jiren couldn't even react until Broly had already arrived in front of him. A punch directly landed on Jiren's face and was sending him flying through several boulders until he hit the largest piece that was still remaining of the stage. That piece was moved by Jiren's impact and slowly descended into the void. Jiren quickly jumped out of the rubble and adjusted his dislocated jaw. He spit out some blood as he looked at Broly, who was still standing on the spot, looking down at him. Jiren was frustrated as he felt that his strikes seemed to have no impact on Broly. He went into this tournament believing that no one was his equal, but now Broly stood proudly in front of him, pushing back against his full power. Even the other Saiyan called Goku and Vegeta had broken through their limits several times and had grown a lot stronger. Jiren feared that Broly might do the same, so he didn't stop and pushed forward again. He stomped the ground, cracking it open in the process, as he shot to Broly. Broly jumped to Jiren as well, and both met with their fist in the middle. The resulted shockwave forced both back and turned the near debris to fine dust particles. They both landed on a floating boulder respectively. Jiren's fist was bleeding from that exchange, but he didn't stop as he once again dashed towards Broly, who shook his hand slightly while frowning. They both turned to a red line and clashed in the middle again. This time they weren't forced backwards as they dodged their opponent's strike. They stopped for a moment before they moved again at high speed. Their arms seemed still, but they were just moving so rapidly that they were invisible for even experienced eyes. They used small rocks that were broken off the stage as a foothold and clashed with each other numerous times. Belmod was getting anxious as he saw Jiren on the losing side. Although neither of them was pushed backwards by each other's strength, Jiren's body accumulated more wounds with each exchange, while Broly overall seemed fine and unharmed. It was like Broly's body was on a completely different toughness scale. Jiren blinked because of the pain he felt at another exchange, which resulted in him being grabbed at the ankle. He tried to kick himself free, but he was already flung away, sent crashing through numerous floating stage pieces. Just as he could stop himself, Broly caught up and slapped Jiren's head into the ground. The boulder crumbled apart from the impact and was then breaking apart into more pieces as Broly followed up with a punch in the guts. Jiren flew across the battlefield before he was stopped by a larger piece of the pillar. He didn't dare to rest there for a second and jumped away. Just after he got away, the pillar was met with a ki blast that completely obliterated it. Jiren's jumping direction was disrupted through the explosion and he crash-landed on another rock. He quickly looked around and suddenly punched out at the seemingly empty air. Broly seemed to appear out of the blue with his head tilted sideways, evading Jiren's fist. Jiren wanted to attack again, but a kick against the side of his kneecap forced him to the ground and made him miss his counterattack. Then an uppercut disorientated him completely for a moment. He couldn't even try to block the hand that grasped his head. Jiren's face was dragged across a rock before being thrown into the air. Before he could turn around and retaliate, Broly kicked his spine. Jiren's body bent backwards as if it would snap in two with a bit more force. He was sent flying high into the sky in an arch before he luckily landed on a larger floating island. Jiren gritted his teeth and stood up again and took a step forward. Unsurprisingly, his leg gave in and he collapsed onto his knees. He gasped for air as his sweat dropped onto the stone beneath him. He looked at his hands that were still trembling from their fists clashing. Blood was dripping down out of wounds that covered almost every corner of his body. He had countless bruises and his muscles were aching, begging for rest. His back felt like it would collapse any second, and every other part of his body was sending out signals of pain as well. A shadow was cast above his head. He looked up at Broly, who still looked perfectly fine, except for some smaller bruises that were healed in front of Jiren's eyes. This gave him another shock that showed him the reality of things. He couldn't maintain his poker face anymore as his confidence was crushed by this overwhelming defeat. His eyes conveyed his despair and loss of fighting will. His head drooped as he didn't dare to look at Broly. Universe 11 spectators couldn't believe their eyes as they saw Jiren's defeated figure. "What are you doing, Jiren?" Toppo suddenly furiously bellowed. "You would kneel before an enemy? Is this pathetic image how you end? Get up, Jiren." Broly looked at Toppo before he turned to Jiren again. He wanted to see if it would be the same as in the series. "What did you build your strength while trusting no one all this time for? Fight for your pride until the end. You may not believe in your own strength, but I do. Until the end. Jiren, you are strong. You are stronger than anyone." As if it was a magic spell, Jiren once again stood up with a blazing aura surrounding his body like furious flames. Jiren clenched his hand to a fist, before waving it towards Broly, releasing a wall of flaming ki in the process. It scorched through the air as it headed for Broly. It blazed across the entire island they were standing on and instantly reached Broly. Broly raised his arms as he stopped the attack with a barrier. Broly increased his power as he held up against the attack before Jiren shouted out, "Begone, Broly!" Chapter 240, Victory Royale. Jiren's ki increased to even greater heights than before. It was like he was getting energy out of thin air. He should have been exhausted, and now he was actually able to push Broly backwards even after he had set up his barrier. Broly's front sight was completely filled with a wall of flame, but his barrier still stood strong until Jiren moved out. Flying through his own flames, he punched his barrier, and a crack instantly formed. He began pounding on Broly's barrier, and with every hit the barrier cracked a bit further. Just as he was about to break through, a blue light hit Jiren from the side. Jiren's body slid over the ground from the impact, and the wall of flames dispersed as a result. He looked towards the source of that beam attack and found Goku, who turned Super Saiyan God. He seemed exhausted as he was breathing heavily after shooting only one Kamehameha. Jiren was furious as he looked towards Goku, how he had disregarded him as an opponent since the beginning, yet still managed to disturb him at this crucial moment. Suddenly, a golden light shot at Jiren's back, who directly turned around and blocked it with his glare. However, it wasn't enough, and he had to put up his hands to block it. The golden beam was scattered into numerous smaller beams and destroyed the surroundings, forcing Broly to find a new foothold. Vegeta, in his Beyond state, had fired a final flash against the unsuspecting Jiren and still did no damage. Tisage. Vegeta spat out and flew towards Jiren. Goku didn't wait and followed suit, heading towards Jiren from the opposite side. You persistent Saiyans, don't interrupt me. Jiren furiously bellowed as he swung his fist at the approaching Vegeta, while catching Goku's fist with his free hand. Vegeta had to block the attack and was sent flying, while Goku was flung right behind Vegeta. They crashed into a boulder together. They quickly recovered and turned into two blue lines as they charged at Jiren. Jiren gave a long shout as he met the two Saiyans in the air. Their exchange was fast and by no doubt a high-level bout. Jiren dominated the two Saiyans in the first half. Out of nowhere, Goku suddenly stepped into Ultra Instinct Omen once again. The fight seemed to be more balanced now, but Jiren still had the upper hand as he pushed the two into submission. They were still being beaten up, but it was far less bad than before, and they landed many attacks as well. Vegeta and Goku went to their limits and beyond as they used every ounce of their body's power. Vegeta pushed his Beyond state to new heights, while Goku got more familiar with Ultra Instinct. Broly had already sat down and watched the battle from a higher viewpoint. He rubbed his chin as he pondered. I wonder if Goku can reach Mastered Ultra Instinct. If he had some popcorn, he would have eaten it already. He was also ignoring that he was being screamed at by Beerus. The god shouted out that he should help the two finish off Jiren. Broly only rolled his eyes as a response, which made Beerus even more furious. Their fight was just too interesting to watch as they blasted through numerous floating pieces. As time passed, Jiren's sudden power boost began to fade and the fight actually grew in intensity. The power play began to tilt and became more equal between the two groups. With their seamless teamwork, Vegeta and Goku turned their disadvantaged situation into a neutral one. Jiren's face distorted as he could slowly feel the pressure of these two. He had previously looked down upon, while Broly was leisurely watching them. Jiren couldn't help but admire the two, who were much weaker in the beginning of the tournament, but now grew tremendously during the fight. He himself felt the pressure and his own growth, while fighting the two. With a shout, his power burst, and he instantly gained the advantage again. Their figures turned into lights and tangled with each other as they clashed. It seemed like they were equal, and the winner was not obvious at all. After Jiren punched the two away, sending them flying, he didn't pursue them and instead jumped backwards to distance himself. He raised his arms, and in an instant, a soaring aura covered almost the entire stage and converged into a single sphere inside Jiren's palms. Vegeta's and Goku's countenance changed as they felt the overwhelming power in this sphere. They didn't hesitate and pushed all their power into a single attack. It ends with this. Jiren roared as he shot out the sphere. Kamehameha. Final flash. Vegeta and Goku counterattacked. Their energy waves obliterated anything in their way as it headed to Jiren's gigantic blast. The very second the two attacks collided, the beams were in a disadvantage. The sphere was slowed down, but it still steadily pushed through towards the two Saiyans. The stray energy beams of this collision were tremendously dangerous and obliterated anything they touched. Broly, however, still didn't move even with Beerus' angry screams. He calmly watched as Goku and Vegeta's attacks were broken as Jiren pushed himself even further to knock them off. The two had no other choice than to try to stop it with their bare bodies. Of course, they were no match against Jiren's attack and were thrown into the void. They then weakly appeared on the spectator seats. Whis quickly healed them. Jiren turned around and looked up towards Broly, who had stood up again. Their gazes met and Broly could feel the determination and confidence in Jiren's eyes. He started applauding Jiren. You are truly amazing and the strongest person I have fought. Which is why. Broly paused for dramatic purposes. Jiren had a bad premonition. I will show you my peak strength. Jiren as well as the spectators were in shock. They had all presumed that Broly had already gone all out, but now he revealed that he still could go even further beyond? He is lying. Broly just wants to delay you until you are too exhausted to contend against him. Belmont screamed and then urged Jiren to attack. However, no one believed his words. Still, the members of Universe 11 were cheering for Jiren to push on. They had seen Broly dominate their invincible Jiren and practically bullied him, but they didn't want to accept defeat. Whis had held his chin as he thought about what Broly's peak strength would be like before he muttered, does he want to combine it? Most of Universe 7 instantly knew what he was thinking about and directly turned to Broly, who sucked in all the ki he was radiating. Then like a wave washing across his fur, it started glowing in a red hue. Previously it already was dark red, but now it turned into a fire red. He looked like he was donning a fire armor with fine lines of silver lines. He gave off a ferocious and wild, but also divine presence that seemed to stand above everything. The normal ki had disappeared and only godly ki remained, but even the amount of ki didn't seem low or thin. In the eyes of the divines, he looked like godly ki itself shaped into a humanoid body. The strength that he was giving off involuntarily was not only a level higher than before, it had shot through the roof. Even Beerus, one of the strongest gods of destruction, seemed pale in front of Broly's might. Broly ignored their shocked expressions and stretched his arms to his sides and pointed his cupped hands towards Jiren. You have done well, Jiren, but this is how far you go. Gamma Ray burst. Broly shouted out, and in an instant a gigantic ki beam headed for Jiren. Every piece of rubble, and even those it didn't touch directly, were pulverized. Jiren's veins bulged, and his ki soared, and converged to another ki blast. He met Broly's attack head-on, but it was just child's play in front of Broly's full might. Jiren's attack was destroyed as it didn't last a second, while he was blasted into the void and then appeared on the spectator seats. Universe 11 shall be erased. The Grand Priest suddenly said, and Universe 11 was enveloped in a milky light. Thank you, Jiren. Toppo said to Jiren as he was held up by them. Why? I treated you all with contempt during the fight. Goku suddenly came in and spoke to Jiren, who was laying on the ground. I know we just finished fighting, but since Broly had defeated you and not me, I still ain't had enough. I know you'll probably hate this, but I think we both got stronger together by fighting. I want to see you again. Broly had flown up and nodded to Jiren as well. Jiren chuckled slightly and then disappeared with the rest of Universe 11. Broly, have you decided on your wish? The Grand Priest suddenly asked before summoning Super Shenlong. Ask for anything. It can do anything. What will it be? The Zenith said in sync, while pointing towards the Divine Dragon. There was only one wish Broly could ask for, wasn't there? Please restore all of the universes that were erased. Chapter 241, Moro. Broly opened his eyes and looked around, only to see himself in an empty bed. He got up and walked out of his bedroom and towards his office on the 3rd floor. He opened the door and sat down at his desk, pressed a button, and then operated on a screen that was raised up from within the desk. He scrolled through several pages of data about branches and trading planets all across the universe. There were also some data about some powerful beings that are causing problems. He looked through some files about traders, which were few in between, and about problems that needed new laws to be dealt with. Corruption was severely punished, and this proved to be diminishing the likelihood of someone becoming corrupt, but somewhere just getting more creative to avoid being revealed. They were in need for new methods to smoke them out. Broly yawned heavily and then turned off the screen before leaving his office. It wasn't that they were boring cases or irrelevant for developing his kingdom. It was just the fact that every single case was in the process of being resolved. Several agents, warriors, lawyers, etc. were already working on these things. Furthermore, Broly wasn't the one that put forward the request to have it solved. He didn't even know of most of these things until he just read it now. It was probably because he hardly managed his own kingdom. Only if it were game-changing events, his opinion was needed. Otherwise, the process was already automated, and the main culprit for this was his own wife. Sigh. That system of hers is too efficient. Why can't she leave me some cases? Broly mumbled. He had walked towards the royal palace, while eating some street food on the way. As he entered the palace, he was greeted by several guards that saluted to him. Broly walked past them and entered the office that was meant for his use, but now someone else was almost living in it. Hey darling. 1 minute. Aaliyah said without looking up as she tipped away on her screen. Broly walked towards the giant window behind Aaliyah that pointed to the city center. Countless people walking to and fro, while several space cars landed or headed into space. He turned around to look at Aaliyah's screen, which displayed a highly sensitive case about a powerful planet in another district they didn't have any authority over yet. It seems like some corrupt Exausians had escaped to this planet and sought refuge there. It was a good thing that all Super Saiyans that headed to Paris Island was bound by a soul contract. Even if they wanted to betray Exausia, they couldn't. If they could, the damage caused would be a lot higher than these average criminals. Aaliyah wrote a few paragraphs before turning around. Hey, sorry about that, Aaliyah said as she stood up to hug him. How are you? Broly asked as he gently placed his hand on her slightly grown stomach. I am fine. Isn't it precisely because paperwork isn't as demanding as training that you asked me to spend more time on it? Indeed, but everything needs balance. Let's go, get breakfast, Broly said as he took her hand and walked towards a couch, where a lazy Zangya was dozing off. He flicked her forehead. You too. The three then picked up Kana in the Agency for Intelligence. Although she was mostly childish, she still often headed to this agency to get the current status of everything. After picking her up, they went to a near restaurant that Broly had taken a liking to. It was just that their pancakes reminded him of past times, even though it wasn't called pancakes here. He relaxed and happily conversed with his wives. Aaliyah couldn't stop talking about work and Kana complained why she didn't have a baby yet. Zangya was yawning the whole time. Her belly hadn't grown yet, but since her control over her body was befitting to her status as an expert, they already knew that it was coming without the need of any scans. They talked a lot, while Broly mostly listened and only put some input into the conversation. They then visited some friends in different solar systems. Most of the disciples of the former city lord had been given a planet when they allied themselves with Broly. They were busy as they had large areas to cover with their management. Actually, everyone they visited and they themselves were busy as they weren't tyrants like Frisia and wanted the planets they occupied or protected to flourish. However, most have already adapted to the new system that Aliyah had introduced, and most of their workload decreased by a lot. It seemed that the system of Aliyah is based on the Big Geat Star. Broly had warned her to not use the original chip and only study it. Otherwise, it would be a bad call to implement it on Exausia. While they were conversing with Zinjo, the crystal on Broly's arm wrist suddenly blinked. Broly pressed on the crystal and a holograph appeared. A report of some problem appeared. Broly frowned as he looked through the report. A week ago, he got a request from the Galactic Patrol. They asked for aid against an escapee called Moro. They said that this guy had even some conflict with Supreme Kais, one of which was the Grand Supreme Kai. Broly remembered that he had seen Moro's name on the list of the most powerful beings in this universe. In fact, Moro was placed at number 1. Broly responded to the Galactic Patrol that he would scout his strength and send out 2 ascended Super Saiyans. Although he said that, he thought they would be enough to deal with this Planet Eater Moro, as the Supreme Kais weren't really impressive to say the least. They even could be called weak in Broly's eyes. However, in the end, they still managed to seal off Moro's magical abilities with Godly Ki. Although the Galactic Patrol couldn't kill him even after having his powers sealed, it was the Galactic Patrol, after all. They weren't just weak, Broly still had no idea how they managed to get a foothold in this universe, known the Milky Galaxy. It was only due to Broly's help that they were able to expand beyond this galaxy. However, now he got a report that the Galactic Patrol lost contact with these 2 Saiyans, and he couldn't help but take it more seriously now. It had to be said that both had devices to instantly send out distress signals, but surprisingly they seemed to have disappeared without a ruckus. The strength of this Moro guy had to be high to instantly get rid of 2 ascended Super Saiyans, not giving any of them a chance to react. Of course, that was only Broly's guess. It wasn't yet confirmed that they had died, much less died to Moro, just their disappearance was noted until now. However, Broly had been bored for the last few months after the Tournament of Power and desperately looked for an opponent. He would have gone to the other universes, but because of his display of strength, he was categorized on the same level of gods of destruction and was therefore not allowed in another god's territory. They monitored him cautiously, and especially the angels had their eyes on him. They had seen the whole battle from the beginning to end and were affected by it the most, even though they didn't show it on their face. Only Whis and Beerus had visited him from time to time, but Whis was unwilling to teach him as he needed to find his own enlightenment. His wives already knew that he would definitely jump on that case now and quickly shoot him away. Zinjo assured him that it was fine and saw them off. After Broly dropped them off on Exausia, Broly didn't hesitate anymore and teleported away to planet Namek. It seemed that Moro somehow got the information of this planet. It didn't take much thinking to understand for what reason he wanted to come here. He gathered the Dragon Balls in one place and floated above them cross-legged. He only needed to wait for Moro to come for him. This way he didn't need to fly around the universe to search for him. Suddenly, he heard explosions in the distance and directly sensed the aura that were coming from there. The magical currents weren't overseen either. It was an impressive display of power, and a smell of death came along with it. It felt like the user was not a living being. In fact, Broly could sense several millions of dead auras. Broly's eyebrows twitched slightly before he casted an illusion and a barrier around the Dragon Balls. Afterwards, he shot into the sky, directly heading for the intense battle in the distance. He squinted his eyes slightly as he felt the life force of the planet being sucked out of. Even the Namekians weren't spared of this destiny. It seemed like his title as a Planet Eater wasn't just decoration. He gritted his teeth as he looked towards the 3 entangled lights with eyes that seemed to glow red. Vegeta, Goku, how dare you steal my prey? Chapter 242, Moro 2. Vegeta and Goku were stunned as they saw a green light heading their way, while being screamed at. After they heard his voice, they instantly knew who it was and quickly distanced themselves, landing far away on some rocks, while watching Broly head to Moro. Moro was confused. They were just in the middle of an intense fight and he almost exhausted their life force, but now they quickly ran away as soon as that guy screamed at them. He had experienced these 2 Saiyans might firsthand and knew that they were exceptional dangerous. If it weren't for his ability to steal their life force, he would rather avoid direct conflict. Now someone made them move away with a simple warning. That person can't be normal. Moro instantly became cautious as he waited for the person to get nearer. Broly stopped a few meters away as he scrutinized Moro from head to toe. He rubbed his chin as if he was evaluating an object he considered buying. You better be able to entertain me, otherwise I would have come all the way for nothing. Broly spat out as he saw deep into Moro's body. There were no secrets this magician could hide from Broly, who was even feared by the gods of destruction. Moro frowned. He couldn't sense Broly's energy, but he could feel the unprecedented confidence exuding out of this newcomer, and these silvery eyes that inspected his body made Moro extremely uncomfortable. Himph, and who are you supposed to be? Moro snorted as he activated his ability to steal the life force of this guy in front of him. Broly felt the energy trying to target his life force. He couldn't keep it to himself and sneered at Moro. His life force had been merged with his soul, and he himself was severed from this multiverse. If it wasn't a technique that could pull life force from every existing multiverse, not even Lord Zeno could make him lose control over it. Broly didn't respond and only cracked his fingers as he looked at Moro with contempt. He could feel the life force of thousands of beings and planets nurturing his body and soul. Although he could quickly achieve great heights with this method, he ended up with an almost uncuttable connection to this multiverse. Of course, it was uncuttable for Moro even if he didn't absorb these poor fools, as he didn't have an ancient multiversal civilization as his support. Moro, obviously, felt something wrong as he couldn't feel any life force coming from this guy in front of him. Just as he wanted to try something else, a fist covered his point of view. He flinched as a sharp pain ran through his nose. He felt his body moving before he crashed into something. He opened his eyes and saw crumbled rocks around him. Groan *tch. A sucker punch? Here I thought he was somebody great. Moro gnashed his teeth in anger as he shot out of his hole. Just as light filled his eyes again, a shadow covered the sunlight again. He only felt something hit the back of his head and was sent deep into the ground. Do you need a gong to announce the start of our life and death battle? Broly sarcastically asked. You bastard. Moro bellowed as he flew out of the deep ground he was just kicked into. He looked around with bloodshot eyes, only to see that guy glowing in a green light. His hair was green as well. It was similar to that form these two Saiyans used, except those two had used godly ki instead. So, you are a Saiyan? That dash Moro was interrupted as a fist met his open mouth. He was flung back, but before he could reorganize himself, he was kicked in the stomach. Broly looked at Moro with ridicule. Man, I know that you try to hold up a conversation, so you could steal this planet's life force, but please don't make it so obvious. Broly shook his head in disappointment. Broly could easily dominate Moro in close combat, and Moro's abilities had no effect on him. The victor of this fight had already been decided from the start. I came here all the way to have a fight, but I had never expected you to be such a letdown. Moro was heavily stunned. Maybe it was because he was punched hard, which made him dizzy, or because his diversion was so easily revealed by him. Moro looked at Broly for a second before smiling inwardly. He suddenly screamed out of seemingly anger and frustration. If I just could have regained my peak from my youth, not even speaking of you, no one in this universe would be my match. Broly's interest was certainly piqued. But, yeah, I am looking for a fight, but if you can't even reverse your current predicament without my help, how are you worth my time? Broly knew that what Moro said was just to arouse his interest and make him help Moro regain his power. Broly had already seen such a case with Vegeta and Cell, but was Broly as dumb as Vegeta? It is true that I want to fight, but old man, if you are not strong enough as you are right now to contend with the new generation, maybe it is time for you to disappear from the stage. With these words, Broly shot towards Moro, who instantly casted out spells before Broly even finished. Broly waved his arm and enormous magical power shot out, obliterating any attack coming from Moro. Broly's fist shot through the air and directly met with Moro's temple. Moro's body flew like a ragdoll as he bounced across the ground. In flight, Moro suddenly redirected his flight and escaped into a rock formation. Broly's voice, however, echoed across the entire planet. Unlimited thunder spears. From behind Broly's back, hundreds upon thousands of spears, made out of all the different energies inside Broly's soul, shot out towards the hiding Moro. Even if Moro erased his aura and used some magic spells to hide himself, Broly could still detect him if they were in the same galaxy or even universe. Broly's speed of increase in strength had grown tremendously as his soul and body complemented each other. His senses were much more accurate over a much greater distance than ever before. He was even sure that he would soon be able to beat even the angels. His energy spears shot into the sky all around Moro's position. Moro sensed something wrong and panicked after witnessing a spear reaching his side. He instantly reacted and put up a barrier around him to withstand the attack. The spear shattered from the tip downwards as it collided with the barrier, but in return left a crack on his barrier. As Moro was still supplying the barrier with his magic, the crack was mended in a second. Moro sneered as he saw the attack being blocked by his barrier. Unlimited thunder spears? I think you should rename your attack. What if that was unlimited? Just as he finished, the surroundings were blasted away. Only the patch where Moro stood on was left untouched. Now, with his vision clear of any obstacles, he saw the hundreds upon hundreds of glowing spears in the air. Oh fuck! Moro cursed as he pushed his energy into his barrier, just in time as the spears shot towards him. As Broly fired his spears, he created more without stopping. Spears continuously rained down on Moro's barrier. The entire vision was shrouded by the scattering lights of the spears. Goku and Vegeta watched the spectacle. "Hey, Vegeta," Goku suddenly said as he still watched the battle. "Know the slaughter. Do you think Broly could have won the Tournament of Power alone?" The lights of this never-ending attack reflected in their eyes. Vegeta and Goku stayed quiet as they watched on. At one point, Broly ceased his attack, only to reveal a pitiful Moro with countless cuts and holes in his body. Blood was flowing out of every corner, and it was obvious that he would be dropping dead every second. Broly's spears were still silently hovering in the air while pointing towards Moro like a guillotine above his head, waiting to claim his life. Broly's body suddenly glowed red and fur appeared on his body, which then seemed to blaze up in flames. Broly held up a hand, and the spears converged into his hand to a giant sphere. The sphere started to change subtly as godly ki was being mixed inside. He then pointed it towards Moro, while saying, "You know, I don't do things by halves." After his voice fell, he attacked, instantly enveloping Moro's body in its entirety. Chapter 243, Birth. Not even dust remained after Broly had obliterated Moro. He had used a bit of godly ki, and used it in a way that made it so it would erase Moro's existence in this multiverse. Broly watched the spot where Moro was killed just now, and couldn't help but feel dissatisfied. It had ended too quickly. He thought this Moro was a great evil with countless aces up his sleeves, but in fact, he only had his life force steel abilities and a rather strong body. But since those two things were nothing in front of Broly, Moro was killed too quickly. Broly had expected more of the person that was ranked first by the Dragon Purunga. He could only sigh and leave after dispelling his illusions and barriers that were protecting the Dragon Balls. He headed back to Exausia and spent some time meditating. The Namekians could restore their planet to their original order by themselves. Goku and Vegeta were also dissatisfied by Broly's victory. However, this only served as fuel to motivate them to go even further. They would head back and train like maniacs, even though every other day would be practically the same with those two. Broly headed back and quickly returned to his everyday life. He didn't go out to journey the other universes or looked for some trouble in the universe. Instead, he supported his wives that were going through their pregnancy. If training most of the day, and then spent some leisure time with them could be said as support. He sometimes visited Jain and spent some time on Earth, enjoying all their food and did some sightseeing with the others. If Broly was lucky, Whis came over, and they would have a spar. Broly even challenged Beerus a couple of times, but the god of destruction was unwilling to fight him. Broly enjoyed the fights with Whis the most. Although they weren't destructive in any way as both were already masters of ki control, it was very high on a technical level. Those spars even let Broly gain some insights into the furtherment of Ultra Instinct. As his insights grew, the white in his hair and on his fur after he transformed spread as well. With only Whis sparring with him, he could develop his martial arts and his Ultra Instinct. The former was especially important as even if he could react to future threats in a fight, he still needed to know how to react properly. The reason why Goku moved differently in the state of Ultra Instinct was because the pure techniques and thinking was coming directly from his soul. His words and actions were coming from his purest self. The same was true for Broly. With mastered Ultra Instinct, anyone could sense future threats and instinctively react to it. But this didn't mean that the soul's way of moving was resulting in the best possible outcome. Broly wanted to hammer the best possible martial techniques into his soul, like Goku did with his Kamehameha. He continuously refined his fighting techniques, while his strength itself was growing absurdly fast. Even Whis had commented on his terrifying growth even in the higher levels of power. After all, every being in this universe had an upper limit, and the closer one got to their limit, the more difficult it was for them to advance. Some would have it lucky and encounter almost no difficulties on their way to great power like the Frost Demons. Speaking of Frost Demons, there was only one still alive in Universe 7. After Frieza was intercepted by Broly, when he and his brother, Cooler, had attacked Exausia's headquarters, he was imprisoned by Broly. Broly sometimes went there and did some experiments on him. As Frieza had exceptional vitality, he was better suited for more extreme experiments. After having his bit of fun, Broly had given Frieza to the medical facility of Exausia. With this they had some breakthrough with some medical applications. Of course, Frieza constantly cursed Broly every time he visited, saying that he would make Broly pay for everything he did tenfold. Unfortunately for Frieza, Broly was rather looking forward in Frieza breaking through to new heights. Maybe he could then give Broly another kind of challenge. As he was spending his time rather leisurely and away from danger, his children were brought to life. Aaliyah gave birth to a healthy young boy, whose battle power was over 9,000. Broly couldn't contain his grin as held his son in his arms. "I am going to make a great warrior out of you. Even gods will fall prey to your hands. You shall be named Kratos." Broly had whispered these words to his son. Thereafter he gave Kratos to his mother, who was eagerly waiting for him. Broly himself didn't know why, but he instinctively gave him this name. Broly felt a warmth feeling rise up in his body when he looked at the two. When he gazed at Kratos, He felt like he could already see the powerful man he would become in the future. Broly imagined him tall and strong with a mighty axe on the back and 2 flaming blades in his hands. Although he didn't know why he could imagine this scene so vividly, he was already proud of him. After Kratos was born, he caused some troubles for Aaliyah and the other 2 moms. He was full of energy and already flew around unhindered. It was only until Broly arrived that he would stop flying. He always giggled when he saw his father, and Broly couldn't help but shower him with love. He always played with him and talked about all kind of stuff he had experienced outside in the universe. He even talked about his journey to Universe 6. More importantly, he talked about the weaknesses of his enemies and how one could exploit them. Kratos unexpectedly seemed to listen carefully, which motivated Broly even further. Aaliyah was the one who had to drag the 2 to bed to get some sleep. Kratos' eyes were glittering especially during Whis and Broly's fight. As if Broly was motivated by his son watching, he improved rapidly as he would never allow himself to be defeated in front of him. Broly was the happiest during this time as he spent time with his family and his friends. After a few months, the next child was on its way. Zangya had been pregnant after Aaliyah and was now ready to give birth. Fortunately, every one of them were exceptional experts with one of the strongest bodies in the entire universe. A birth showed no difficulties to them. Broly was as happy as the first time and couldn't wait to hold his child in his arms. After the doctor finished everything, he handed the child over to Broly. He lovingly gazed at his second son. He called him Bruce. Broly himself was surprised as it instantly shot out of his mouth. They had thought about names, but when he saw his own children, he only needed to see them once, and he would be able to tell what they should be called. Even stranger, he could even think about a last name and an alternative name. Broly quickly shook his head to get rid of these weird thoughts and focused on checking his son's vital situation. He was overjoyed to see that Bruce showed no sign of being weaker than Kratos. However, unlike his older brother, Bruce seemed extremely intelligent since the beginning of his birth. He seemed to nod in understanding when Broly told him some stories. On the other hand, he was less of a troublemaker compared to Kratos, but he still found ways to keep the moms on their feet. Broly looked at Bruce and couldn't help but think about Helen. It was because she had traveled back in time that history changed and he and Zangya didn't give birth to her. I should probably visit her in the future, Broly promised and then turned his attention back to his sons, who were playing with each other. It was really surprising how fast they develop as a Saiyan and a Saiyan Hera mix. Broly looked over to Kana, who had gleaming eyes as she entertained the 2 children happily. Maybe it will be a girl this time. Broly subtly gestured Kana to the bedroom, who coincidentally looked to his direction. Previously, he didn't want to take care of 3 babies at the same time, but now he didn't think it was too exhausting. Even a 3rd child wouldn't be able to exhaust the strongest being in Universe 7. Kana's eyes widened when she saw his gesture and quickly said her goodbyes to the 2 rascals. She hurried into the bedroom with Broly. Chapter 244, 6 years. Saturnine, don't anger your mother, Broly said in his training chamber while doing push-ups. Next to him were 3 little figures imitating their father. I will finish my training session and then I go to sleep, a cute little 6-year-old girl said as she gritted her teeth while doing push-ups with shaky arms. Broly glanced at her and couldn't help but roar out in laughter. Fine, but you will take the brunt of your mother's wrath. Broly looked at Kratos and Bruce, who were steadily doing their workout. No hint of struggle could be seen on their face. The 2 boys of Broly had strong bodies, and their growth were phenomenal. Bruce was the brute out of the 2. As he was both a mix of a legendary Super Saiyan as well as a Hera, his transformation made him unexpectedly buff and incomparable violent. He could hardly contain himself, and would usually end up breaking something. Kratos had the same problem with his rage, however. He could completely direct it to boost his powers greatly. Surprisingly as well, Kratos took a liking to blades. Broly, with his perfect body control as well as with his diligent training with his sword, was able to teach him several knickknacks. Broly was currently working on a design of 2 blades that he would gift Kratos when he becomes 10 years old. It was inspired of the vision he had when he had held Kratos for the first time. Saturnine was incomparable strong as well, but unlike her brothers, she wasn't as gifted in the physical level. However, her innate talent of magic was staggering. Broly had received quite the shock when he saw her cast several spells after seeing them from Broly once. Obviously, Broly's as well as his wife's genes were producing terrifying descendants. Each and every one of them was talented to the extreme. After Broly realized their talent, he had trained them hard. Right now, normal emperors were of no match to these children. In fact, they could swagger almost everywhere in the universe. Fortunately, his wives were supportive of him training them, but even if they weren't, how would Broly let their talent get to waste? After a while, the 4 were ready to finish their workout session. Since tomorrow would be Saturnine's enrollment in school, her mothers had forbidden her to train into the deep night as usual, but Saturnine didn't want to listen. Like her brothers, she stood straight and eagerly looked at their father. He smiled knowingly and sat down cross-legged facing them. All right, show me what you have learned. After every training session at the end of the month, they were eager to show off new abilities or techniques they had learned. They wanted to impress their father, who was praised by everyone they had ever met. Even the gods themselves were fearful of and respectful to him. In the hearts of these three, Broly was the greatest existence there is. So, he was the first they wanted to show off their skills. His praise was even higher valued than their mother's. Of course, this was only in this aspect in life. But Broly always took joy in sitting down and watching his children perform their little skills. However, he took this matter incomparable serious. Every one of the three stepped forward and pushed themselves and their abilities to their limits. Afterwards, they were staring at Broly with gleaming in their eyes. Broly smiled as he praised the strong points of each of their attacks, which made them unbelievable happy as for what followed had dimmed their happiness a bit. Broly pointed out the weakness and ways to exploit their abilities. It was at this point that Broly didn't mince his words and pointed out every little flaw. As always, you have to be proud of what you have achieved, but never be content with your current status. Strive for improvement. Disappointed, the three slumped their ways out of the training chamber. This was the only point where Broly wouldn't mince his words. He wouldn't be able to protect them for his entire life, and if they didn't strive for improvement or develop flawed abilities, they wouldn't survive long out in the universe. Even if they were all truly strong beings since children, the strong always attracted other strong foes. He wasn't overly high expectant of them, but in this area, it seemed like his children could never truly impress their father. He smiled bitterly as he saw them strode out saddened. He then stepped outside as well and took a shower. After cleaning himself, he took a look in the mirror and saw a tall, strong man staring back at him. His silver eyes and silver hair were especially striking. It has been a few years since the Tournament of Power, and during this time he was mostly at home, enjoying the peace. Strangely, after his heart settled down to the peaceful times, was he able to have another breakthrough in Ultra Instinct and finally mastered it. The majority of his life had he never truly relaxed for longer periods of time. After enjoying this type of life as well, he seemed to have gained tremendously, which is to say that he was now able to perceive danger even before they actually were set in motion. In a way he could see in the future which wasn't affected by the time laws of the universe or even multiverse he was residing. Of course, even after having mastered it, he continued to dive deeper into this realm and found out that he could increase the degree of which he could see into the future. Mastering Ultra Instinct was just entering the door of perceiving the future of his existence. After achieving this breakthrough, he had taken his entire family, consisting of 3 wives and 5 children, on a trip to other places in the universe he had once told stories about. His children's eyes were glistening almost the entire journey. It had filled Broly's heart with an incomparable warmth. He had even met up with Jiren again and had a little fight with him. Jiren's growth was obviously disgustingly fast, but he still wasn't comparable to the walking monster called Broly. After meeting up again, Jiren as well as other old friends had commented that he had changed in temperament after the birth of his children. After Saturnine, Kratos and Bruce, Broly had gotten 2 more children, who weren't as troublemakers as their older siblings. One of them was now 4 years old and already gave off the presence of a king. Zeus was his name, and Broly knew that in the future he would become the next king. Although the others might be stronger than him, Broly was sure that Zeus would be the best suited for the throne. Broly wasn't sure why he had directly thought about the Greek god when he had held him up and named him, but after seeing Zeus throw his magical thunder spears at the age of 3 that he had imitated from Broly, Broly thought that the name indeed suited him. Saber was the youngest child. She was probably the only one that never had caused any trouble and was always full of smiles. Although they didn't cause as much trouble as the others, Broly was still a bit overwhelmed with the 5 children and thought that he needed to take it more slowly. He had once thought that with his powers it would be easy to raise a few more children, but after realizing that he wanted to train each and every one of them, his time for himself was severely reduced. The children of Broly had probably the most fantastical childhoods. The things some people saw throughout their whole lifetime wouldn't necessarily match up to what they had seen in a couple of years. Broly felt really blessed and wanted to spend more time with them, but his children were certainly not the sole reason why he had stayed low for the last few years. He had built up a solid relationship to the Earthlings, and even became friends with Beerus and Whis. Everyone thought that he would stay tame, but no one knew that he was only accumulating his strength. After achieving mastered Ultra Instinct, he could finally bring his final plans into motion. He would gamble everything. If he succeeds, he would gain everything, and if he fails, he would in turn lose everything. Everything or nothing. As he thought about it, the eyes in the mirror seemed to flash with decisiveness. Chapter 245. Plan. Daddy, come tell us a story. Saturnine ran into bathroom in her pajamas and pulled Broly at his hand. Broly was dragged into the children's bedroom with the other 4 already waiting for a bedtime story. Although they all had their own room, they had dragged their beds into one, so they could always have a sleepover. Broly was always happy when he saw that their relationship was this great. They were already tugged into the bed and looked at Broly with expectant eyes. Saturnine jumped into her bed and quickly covered herself with her blanket. With only their heads peeking out, they watched Broly pull out a chair and sat down. His wives were going around and gave each of them a goodnight kiss before they waited for Broly to start his story. Usually they would add their perspective to the story, since Broly always told stories about real-life experiences. Each of them had their favorite story. Kratos especially liked the ones where Broly started his rampage as a revenge for the attempt on his life. Bruce was fond of the stories when Broly came to Earth and bullied Uncle Goku and Vegeta. Saturnine liked everything related to the crystals. Her eyes glistened whenever she heard of their weird appearance. Especially after seeing them with their own eyes, did she become even more eager to hear more about them. Zeus was interested in Broly's telling about how he thought about new techniques and skills. Saber was the most enthusiastic about the first sword of Para. The island was in fact one of the children's favorite vacation places. Alright, today's story is about some assassins that didn't know the limits of their abilities. At that time my soul was injured, and I had to heal it with the Origin Spirit Crystal. Your mother, Aaliyah, and I had traveled from Exausia. After a while, Broly's story ended, and the 5 little devils were already deeply sleeping. As the parents walked down the floor to their own bedroom, Aaliyah started to talk to Broly, while the other 2 were just silently following. Say, what do you have in mind? Broly was awoken out of his thoughts and turned to Aaliyah and the other 2, who were giving him a meaningful look. He could only smile slightly. You know, it has been a while since I have mastered Ultra Instinct. I am stronger than ever. Don't. Aaliyah shouted out before her voice calmed down again and continued. We know of your ambitions, but you have to think about them. Aaliyah and Broly didn't have to say much more. Everyone was on the same page. Since the beginning, both sides, his wives and Broly, had each their own pursuit in life. Leah wanted to rule the Saiyans, Kana wanted her revenge on Frieza, while Zangya wanted to conquer the universe, but everything changed when Broly came into their life. Kana and Zangya had turned their life around him. Aaliyah was able to fulfill her dream and rule over the Saiyans, but her main priority in life was Broly as well. However, Broly had never stopped following his ambitions. No, it even grew with time. Not even his wives could now deter him from that. He wanted to become the strongest and rule over the entire Dragon Ball multiverse. They thought that they were fine with that and wholeheartedly believed that he would achieve it, but now their perspective in life changed again. After giving birth to their children, they were equally if not more important than Broly in their heart. Now Broly wanted to move forward in his plans to conquer the multiverse, but what would happen if he failed? Would Lord Zeno or the angels take that laying down? What would happen to them? What would happen to their children? They felt extremely conflicted and didn't want Broly to step forwards, but they also knew that they couldn't change his mind. Broly, darling, please. The 3 saw his determined gaze and knew that persuading him would be more difficult than turning heaven and earth upside down. At least wait for a few more years until the children have grown up. Broly looked through the walls at his children, who were sleeping soundly. This isn't something I can delay. Broly, listen to me. You know how fast their growth is. If given 20, no, even 10 more years, they will be strong enough to protect themselves and even help you in your plans. Besides, you yourself said that mastering Ultra Instinct is just the entrance of this realm. You will be a lot stronger in the future, and your success will be higher. You don't have to be anxious. Lord Zeno won't improve as well as the angels. They have been stagnant for so long, they won't improve. Broly had listened quietly to Aaliyah's persuasions with a loving smile on his face. He then hugged her and pulled the other 2 into the hug as well. You misunderstand me. It is not that I want to do it now, but because otherwise my chances of success would drastically shrink. They are moving out in a few years. If I set it in motion now, they won't be as prepared as they could be. If I wait for them to be prepared, it will become exceedingly dangerous. His wives were quiet as they listened to each word he was saying. I am fully aware what these 5 will achieve with our guidance in the future, but time is not on our side. I am not the only player on the field. This can't be delayed. Afterwards, I promise, we will be able to settle down as long as you like. Broly said and released them before turning around wanting to leave, but as he turned around his hand was grabbed by Aaliyah. She had a determined look on her face that spoke for her conviction. Then tell us everything you have planned and what you know. We want to be informed, so we can react accordingly. Who knows, maybe we can improve your plan. For heads are better than one. After all, let us help you. You aren't a lone wolf anymore. Broly was momentarily stunned and couldn't help but nod to her forceful words. The 3 then walked past Broly and into their bedroom. What are you waiting for? Come, let's discuss this plan of yours. Broly awoke out of his stun and roared out in laughter before he walked inside as well. He walked inside and slammed the door. A gust of wind arose in the room, and numerous hidden compartments that had illusions and other seals on top of them were revealed and opened up. Several metal pieces flew in the air and built a construct in the air. Several pages landed on the floor, and the drawings on it formed several futuristic constructs. Several beings could also be seen on some pages and basic information about them, like abilities, age, last known location, and their motives. Oh my god, how long are you already working on this? The three looked at the room that was now plastered with pages of drawings and scribbles. Since you want to participate, I should start from the beginning of what is about to happen. I hope you cleared your calendar for the next week. There is a lot to talk about. The three looked at each other before pulling out a device and tried to cancel several events, but they found out that their signal was not getting out of the room. Broly rolled his eyes. Did you think I don't have any security measures? If I don't want anyone to know what is happening inside here, no one will. Even entering or leaving will be almost impossible, Broly said with absolute confidence. Aaliyah's eyes flashed as she thought about something. So, when our new beautiful maid dashed into this room, you could have prevented her from seeing us when we were in the middle of dash. Broly's mouth twitched. I didn't sense her coming. I had no time to react. Broly shouted as if he was trying to shout away his unease. This time it was their turn to roll their eyes. Chapter 246, Universe Seed. Alright you guys. This will be like our holidays with just the fact that we will join you later, Broly said as he kneeled in front of his children. They were standing at the borders of Para's island with dozens of other Saiyans. His children could tell that Broly was solemn and determined, incomparable to any moment in the past. They could only nod and hug him and their mother silently. Aiz and Taro were there as well and said their goodbyes to their families respectively. Everyone could tell that something major was happening. After a lengthy goodbye, the S-Fighters headed back to their universe. They were silent on the way until Aiz spoke out. So, are they already on the move? Broly nodded. Yes, I have long freed them from a prison from that demon called Fu. If everything goes as expected, they should have rashly stolen the Universe Seed and headed to the nearest strongest expert. Since it was nearer to Universe 6, they should have gone to hit. After reading his mind, they should know where to find me and head there. We only need to wait and take it. Our success should be guaranteed. The only difficult thing will be my fight. Broly and the rest then teleported back to their planet, only to be greeted by several grand explosions. They swept their gaze across the battlefield and saw the Earthlings in a bitter fight with several unknown enemies. They are faster than expected. They are already here. Aaliyah said calmly what was on everyone's mind. Doesn't matter. As long as they are here, victory shall be ours. Broly nodded as they looked around. They even saw Jiren, Hit, and Broly's disciples. They were entertaining some enemies, whose races Broly had no real-life experience with. One humanoid figure was completely unknown to Broly. She had blue skin and long, pale turquoise hair in a style of two ponytails. From time to time, she released powerful attacks that manifested in a form of crystals. Another two of that group looked like the Tuffle parasite had invaded Vegeta's body in Dragon Ball GT, but Broly wouldn't be able to tell for sure if they were indeed of that race. The apparent leader of that group had blonde hair and pointed ears. He wore a black coat and looked like he wore orange safety glasses. Another person of that group was especially striking to Broly. A Saiyan with an evil aura surrounding him was mightily resisting the several heroes of the multiverse. This Saiyan used his aura to somehow affect Exausian Guardians. The moment these Saiyans touched his aura, they powered up and went berserk, preventing Kale and Caulifla from getting closer. Hit and Jiren were fighting the Saiyan, the leader, and that crystal woman head-on. Unexpectedly, Jiren was closely entangled with that glass person and the leader seemingly not able to get an advantage. Another person that caused trouble to the group was unexpectedly fused Zamasu. His strength was great, but that was hardly enough to stop the mighty mortals of planet Earth. Fortunately for that group, the ones that Broly had suspected of being Tuffles started invading Vegeta's body. With the two working together, they quickly suppressed Vegeta's consciousness and were able to take over. It was an ugly sight for Goku and crew as one of their main force turned on them. Broly hadn't realized it, but Goku seemed to have gotten some training from the Grand Priest, as his clothes has changed to that of the Grand Priest, and his mastery of Ultra Instinct had risen by a lot. The fight stabilized with that and turned into a stalemate. However, Goku and the rest were elated when they saw Broly and his companions in the distance. The other group were obviously frustrated when they saw them, but they could only grit their teeth. The leader of this group, Hearts, had come to Exausia as he had read Hit's mind when they fought. He knew that Hit thought of Broly as the strongest mortal in the multiverse, and he wanted to compare notes with Broly, but he had never expected that another mighty mortal, this Jiren guy, would be here to cause so much problems. He was barely able to suppress the group in front of him, and now the strongest mortal headed this way. Of course, he just needed the energy of these guys, but nothing would matter if they were overwhelmed and lost against them. Hearts thought about retreating. Broly glanced at the fierce fight that was rampaging across his planet before stopping on the Universe Seed that was hovering above high in the sky and pulsated slowly. The Universe Seed looked like a red flaming pearl imprisoned in a giant crystal with several spikes and golden pearls floating around it. Broly could see the released energy of everyone present being absorbed by this seed. If it had enough energy, This seed would blossom in an explosion and another universe would be created. Now that he saw the universe seed once again, he steeled himself. At one point this demon Fu had tried to kidnap him, but after failing he wasn't able to get rid of Broly, who had been secretly tracking him. When Broly saw the universe seed, an idea was born. Through Fu, he had gathered the information of every warrior that Fu intended to use to create this universe and made a plan out of this information. Now it was time to turn this idea into reality. Just as everyone thought that Broly would aid them, Broly took out what seemed like a remote control and pressed on a button. Suddenly metal arms that looked like spider legs reached out of the ground as if something had climbed out of the core of the planet. The metal arms surged with insane speed and wrapped itself around the universe seed. The arms slowly closed and turned into a perfect, seamless sphere that hovered silently in the air. Hearts was shaken to his core as he felt his control over the universe seed easily be torn apart as it disappeared in this strange construct. Several cracks on the floor that covered the entire planet suddenly started glowing in an ominous white light. Several beams then shot towards the sphere with the universe seed, covering the whole sphere in a strange pattern. Broly then nodded his chin towards the group that had initially stolen the universe seed. Broly's companion instantly knew what to do. They then headed towards them and attacked while screaming at the other fighters. "We have locked it away for now. We have to drive them away before our sphere collapses and they can take it away again." The Saiyans bellowed as they launched several fierce attacks towards Hearts and his group. The others were stunned at the strange sight of the sphere, but after being reminded they started attacking again, driving Hearts and the others further away from the sphere. With the additional Super Saiyan gods, this small group were barely able to hold on and were quickly beaten into submission. However, not everyone's attention was fully on Hearts and his crew. Jiren glanced at Broly, who hadn't moved at all. Jiren squinted his eyes slightly as he looked at Broly's figure. He suddenly turned towards Broly and released a ki blast, which went right through Broly's body. In the next moment, Broly and the sphere disappeared like smoke in the wind. Jiren instantly looked around but couldn't see a trace of him. He decided to quickly settle this group and get any information they could get out of them. He couldn't help but feel anxious as he remembered the warning the Grand Priest gave him. The Grand Priest stated that even he couldn't see through Broly, but he could tell that he was planning something significantly. At first, he hadn't taken it too seriously, but after getting an invitation of him to come to his planet and then directly being attacked by this weird group, something was definitely amiss, and he wasn't sure if his strength would be enough to resolve it. While they fought against the original owners of the universe seed, Broly landed the sphere on a rocky planet inside a separate layered dimension. After placing the sphere in a circular platform, the platform seemed to get powered up. Broly then grabbed into his pocket and pulled out a circular double-sided button. He pressed it without hesitation, and an instant later Lord Zeno appeared in front of him. Chapter 247, Diversion. "You are not Goku," Zeno said with his childlike voice as he pointed at Broly. "Indeed, but I don't think this is a surprise for you, right, Zen-chan?" Broly said with a cold smile on his face as he gazed at the tiny Omni King. Broly radiated a dangerous vibe, and Zeno felt threatened. As soon as this feeling in Zeno was aroused, he began to frown and took a step backwards. While he stepped backwards, his body seemed to go through the stages of life as he grew in height, and his arms and legs developed into strong assets instead of the twig-like existence before. His size was not any shorter than Broly's. After only a second, Zeno's body grew to that of a middle-aged man, but appearances, of course, were deceiving. Zeno was an old monster who only now decided to return to his original eternal look. Humph. Another mortal seeking death. No innocent in his voice could be heard anymore. Instead, it carried an overbearing confidence and strength with it. Broly calmly watched as Zeno's being grew more dangerous. No ki or godly ki, no magic or life force. Zeno still radiated a vibe that contained a profound strength with it. This was a true Omni King. Zeno looked deeply into Broly's eyes as if he tried to read something out of them before speaking again. "I didn't expect someone to use a universe seed to create a separate space, instead of ruling it himself, but do you really think you were able to imprison me with this?" Zeno looked at the sphere in contempt, but this look quickly changed to a surprised one. Zeno then looked down to the ground and began to frown. "You seem to have noticed. The universe seed is just the energy source to power up this planet that I created with ancient knowledge of Para." Zeno finished his sentence and shot a look at Broly, who seemed rather relaxed. "You actually colluded with this vile civilization? These so-called truth-seekers? And here I thought we had eradicated them." Zeno's look grew more serious compared to before. "By the way, your little angels won't be able to come in time," Broly said as he began to smile. "In several universes, I have converted the center of galaxies into bombs that will rip apart the universe it is located in. Some of them were already created and even protected by Paris crystals that weren't even recorded on the star map. This fortunately saved me a lot of time. However, It still took me a half a decade to create 2 universal bombs, and let's not talk about the preparation. Good thing I have Para's knowledge as the foundation, otherwise I would have to do it from scratch. How long would have that taken me, I wonder? Zeno's countenance changed as he listened to Broly's speech. You know the location of their bombs and created even more of them? There is no way. I wouldn't have noticed this. With a mortal of my multiverse would have these kinds of plans. I would have, you aren't working with them, you are Dash? Broly interrupted Zeno's exclamation with a sword that appeared in his hands. I am Para's new ruler and I shall finish what the previous generation has started. Power filled his entire body and soul the moment he unsheathed the first sword. It seemingly gave him infinite power. Broly's mad laughter resounded on this barren planet as he rushed towards Zeno and swung his sword. You have to listen to me. These aren't Dyson spheres. These are bombs that will rip a giant hole into the universe and then turn into a massive explosion that will destroy anything in its vicinity. You have to tell us where they are. The entire multiverse will collapse, and your children won't be spared either. The Grand Priest anxiously looked at Broly's wives, who were being held down by the other angels. As soon as this timeline Zeno was being called by Goku's button, the other Zeno felt an ominous premonition and directly woke up from his childlike state. He flew out and immediately found a gigantic bomb around some galaxy's center. It was covered in a white mist, which prevented Zeno from having direct influence on it. Even perceiving them in his child state was rather difficult. It was only after the awoken Zeno took a look around the universe that his eyes easily perceived what was hiding inside. However, that didn't take precedence. He instantly went to find his other self. Fortunately, he wasn't unfamiliar with these bombs and therefore could order some angels and his bodyguards to find the other bombs and disable them, while he sent a group led by the Grand Priest to find out if the group that handled the Universe Seed was related to this. As the Grand Priest was aware of the situation with the Universe Seed, he directly headed to Exausia and questioned everyone present. He directly forced the information out of everyone present and noticed that he couldn't read the minds of Broly's companions. He instantly knew that they were the most suspicious and tried to appeal to them. The moment the emotions of Broly's wives wavered, after images of him tapping the forehead of Broly's companions appeared. He forced his way through a soul barrier that was constructed in their minds and went through all the information in an instant. He instantly knew where to find these bombs and wanted to head out immediately. His eyes flashed coldly as he nodded to the angels that were holding Broly's companions down and then disappeared. The angels obviously knew what to do and casted some spells to shackle them up. Just as they were about to imprison them, an energy wave slashed towards them. They directly dodged the attacks and looked at the two aggressors approaching. 2 Roman soldiers with a striking blue and red cape respectively quickly strode towards the angels. Broly's companion immediately ran towards the soldiers. They were confused and didn't know what to do after getting all the information from the Grand Priest. But after seeing the angles having malicious intent, they sought refuge by Para's throne guards out of reflex. The soldiers unexpectedly attacked Broly's companion with a palm strike. The two were too fast, making it impossible for them to dodge. However, after being hit by the palm, Broly's companions didn't seem to be hurt at all. Only their eyes seemed to have dimmed. After a second, they regained their colors and Aaliyah exclaimed, "I remember. We have to leave." The throne guards took that as sign and released 2 dazzling attacks towards the angels, making them retreat once again. After the attacks disappeared, so did Broly's crew. The angels of the other universes could only grit their teeth as they headed towards the location of the bombs that they received telepathically from their father. What the hell? Where are they? The Grand Priest furiously bellowed as he destroyed yet another galaxy. This should be the galaxy, there is no doubt about it. He was about to lash out again before he seemed to have realized something. They never knew of the bomb's location. This is bad. We have to tell the other Zeno about it. Only he can find the other bombs. The Grand Priest was getting anxious as well as the other angels, who were frantically looking for the bombs. They couldn't allow the universe from getting destroyed. These universes were directly linked to Zeno's power, and Broly was well aware of this fact. It was a common tactic from Para to invade the enemy's multiverse and destroy some universes inside. The overlords of the different multiverses were almost always ruling over it with the universes linked to their beings. Para's bombs not only destroyed the universes, but severed the link to the respective overlord. That was also why even the Dragon Balls weren't able to restore the Universe 13 to 18 that Zeno had erased. Without the link, even the Super Dragon Balls weren't able to restore them. Chapter 248. Zeno vs. Broly. Hiya! Broly slashed out, and an invisible slash headed towards Zeno, who quickly dodged the attack. Zeno waved his arm, and like the sword's attack, invisible waves appeared that rushed towards Broly. Broly was only able to perceive the attacks through his near all-seeing eyes. He slashed the attacks apart with the sword and rushed to Zeno again. The rocky planet's surface was already laid open for everyone to see. A metallic black shine was reflected back. Their bodies flashed around in this dimension, but every attack of theirs or even the collisions seemed eerily harmless. Their attacks had already transcended mere destruction force on matter and was already operating on a purely soul level. Still, these attacks, although not directed at matter, were still affecting matter around them. The entire planet was created out of special metal that was barely holding on the fight between these two semi-overlords. Obviously, Broly has yet to enter the overlord level, but through his sword, his powers were at least being pushed into and even slightly past the same realm in which Xeno was residing. At least, this Xeno. Every move Xeno made carried a profoundness that moved the laws of the Omniverse. Fortunately, the first sword slashed out in a similar manner each time. Befitting on his status as the Omni King, he was suppressing Broly, and it was only a matter of time until Broly would fall. The only reason Broly could stand equal to Xeno was due to his vision and of course the first sword. Their attacks were devastating, and even this realm that was based on the ancient knowledge of a civilization that conquered other multiverses plus a naturally formed universe seed outside of Xeno's direct influence was barely holding on. The mere stray energies of their attacks would be capable of disrupting any multiverse out in the Omniverse, and this was a result of beings that weren't even legitimate overlords. Xeno's strength was suddenly fluctuating. Ha 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 ha. The universes are collapsing. Your end is near. Lord Xeno. Broly roared out as he became more aggressive. Even without Broly's mockery, Xeno had instantly felt that some universes had just been destroyed. He knew couldn't keep Broly at bay any longer. After losing a substantial number of universes, Broly's strength had now far exceeded his. If this continued, he would certainly die. He was only able to hold on as his knowledge was far deeper than Broly's. He desperately defended against Broly, who was relentlessly attacking with all his might. Xeno knew that his situation was dire and turned around to see if he could find a way out. His gaze finally landed on the sphere that was holding the universe seed and instantly released a tremendous amount of energy that shook this dimension on all bases. Xeno released an attack towards the sphere, which flung it out of the platform. As soon as the sphere left its spot, cracks appeared all around in the air until it burst open. Xeno was elated as he saw this. Now the other self could sense him and come to aid him, but it was already too late. Broly had immediately taken the chance after Xeno turned around to attack the sphere. A flash separated Xeno's body into two halves as Broly's sword slashed through him. Xeno turned around and had a sneer on his face. You may have killed me, but after the other fragments know of my death, they will fuse and then kill you. Even if they didn't, it is obvious that the sword's energy reserves are already depleted. You will be pinched to death by them. Your end is near. Broly looked at Xeno as if he was an idiot. This child state of yours may have rotten your brain. Don't you remember in what Para's expertise laid and why they became nomads? Xeno's expression changed as he looked over to the universe seed, which was revealed to all. With their resources, they could have easily created new universes and lived in the other multiverses peacefully, but they didn't. Instead, they flew around in the endless omniverse and conquered other multiverses. Even I don't know the reason behind it, as it was something only the true higher-ups of that civilization knew. Xeno answered as he looked back to Broly, who had stretched out his sword towards the dissipating Xeno. The universe seed flew above Xeno and started absorbing his energy. They used various means to steal energy of other overlords, and used it to turn it into soul energy to strengthen themselves. Their knowledge about the soul was peerless in the Omniverse and had thousands of ways to gain more power. Using a universe seed was one of the more extravagant ways, as a seed had much more greater uses. After I saw that seed of Fu, I knew what I had to try. However, I needed to gamble on something. As his speech continued, Xeno's face was in disbelief and shock. They actually absorbed other overlords? No wonder they hunted us down, and every single member of their higher-ups was terrifying strong. In our fight, numerous multiverses perished and only few remained, and they did it only to gain even more strength? Xeno was shocked to the core and didn't notice that the process of the universe seed absorbing his energy actually delayed his death, and his aura remained around. Still, his death was certain, and Xeno was unable to reverse it. This fragment's death was created through the Omniverse laws. Even overlords like him are unable to do something about it. I wasn't sure if this childlike appearance was just a weird fetish of yours, but considering Para's invasion and the story about you erasing Universe 13 to 18, the chance of you being injured was fairly high. My guess was cemented by the fact that there are more than one Omni King in this multiverse. Although different timelines, there can't be more than one, especially another version of oneself. At least, in the history of Para, there was not one of this case. I am not sure why you were separated into more fragments, as you called it, but your strength was surely not up to par to your past. My guess was that Para had somehow shattered your being. Xeno seemed to have fallen into deep thoughts before he shook his head. I have separated myself intentionally. With this method, my recovery speed was increased exponentially with each fragment. Broly could only sigh at this information. Then this defeat makes it even more bitter. Indeed, It has only been a few 100 million years and I still haven't healed, but nevertheless my death isn't the end. You will pay no matter dash. Before Zeno could finish his sentence, his energy dissipated and was absorbed by the universe seed. Broly didn't hesitate as he rushed towards the seed and stabbed deeply into the core. His sword lit up as tremendous amount of energy surged into his sword. The universe seed turned into light as it was completely sucked into the first sword and disappeared after a short moment. Broly closed his eyes as he controlled the gushing energy to remain inside his sword for a while before absorbing it. He was turning all the energy of the universe seed, which was already incomparable pure, into soul energy. To turn energy into his own strength was a basic function of every sword created by Para, but most of the time it took too long to purify it. This time, however, the energy was already close to the origin of the Omniverse and was therefore easily convertible. After starting to absorb the converted soul energy, he felt a surge of power rising in his soul and body. His mind and conscience seemed to resonate with the universe seed, and with it he perceived the purest insights possible. His understanding of his soul and therefore ultra instinct was deepening to a horrifying degree. He could feel the chaotic laws of the Omniverse all around him as his power increased significantly every second. In the first few seconds, his strength had already doubled, and it continued to rise with no end in sight. His being was getting more ethereal with every second. He seemed to transcend soul and body, as he himself turned into something comparable of a universe. Of course, this was only an illusion that others would see if they looked at him, as he absorbed the universe seed with a fifth of an overlord's strength. He finished his absorption and his sword was once again filled up with energy. Broly could feel the strength of his being raised to an unbelievable state. Even without the sword, he would now be able to endure Zeno's attacks. However, Broly didn't relish in his success as he felt someone appear in the sky. It was the second of the total 5 Zenus, whose expression showed his deep shock. He had rushed here in the hope to aid his other self, but who would have thought that he'd die just like this? Broly looked at the Zeno from the other timeline and couldn't help but smile. The strength of each fragment was fairly similar, and with his sword filled up with energy again, it would be a breeze to kill a second one and absorb his energy. As he didn't have a second universe seed, he could only slowly convert Zeno's energy. After killing this fragment, he will have to stay low. The other fragments will surely fuse, even if that meant that their recovery will be slowed down. Broly turned to the speechless Zeno. His body seemed to slowly fly towards Zeno as he slashed out. Now, even without the sword, his every move seemed to carry a profoundness with it. Even though it was less than Zeno's, it was still significant enough to make Zeno feel threatened. Chapter 239, Abuse. Broly skipped backwards as he evaded Jiren's attacks. One was moving forward, relentlessly attacking, while the other was dodging and blocking the attacks during his backtracking. Jiren was going in overdrive as he was depleting his energy at a rapid pace, but he was still unable to overpower Broly. Just as Broly caught Jiren's fist, Jiren's ki converged in his fist before it instantly erupted in an explosion without giving Broly time to react. Broly was forced backwards as he slid across the ground. However, he was still calm as ever, as if he wasn't directly hit by an attack of a warrior of high caliber. Even his hand that had caught Jiren's fist seemed completely fine. Jiren, on the other hand, was using a lot of energy and couldn't extend this fight for the rest of the tournament. He raised his ki and pushed himself as far as he could to end Broly as quickly as he could. After all, there were still other warriors of Universe 7 still on the battlefield. Broly was not surprised as he sensed Vegeta and Goku move towards Jiren, wanting to participate in the fight. They both rushed past Broly and headed for Jiren. Goku as a Super Saiyan God Kaioken times 20 while Vegeta rushed at Jiren as a Super Saiyan God Beyond. Out of my way, weaklings. Jiren raised his hand and directly sent out dozens of ki blasts in an instant. They slapped a few away but were quickly overwhelmed by the strength that resided in each blast. After being hit a couple of times, their smoking bodies were thrown to the side as they reverted back to their base form. It was no surprise that they were knocked out instantly. Jiren wasn't playing anymore. He didn't care who it was. He was going all out now. Even Broly was unwilling to confront these blasts head-on and dodge them instead. This is your end, Broly. Jiren gathered lots of energy and shot a flaming ki beam towards Broly. Like a snake, it followed the dodging Broly across the battlefield. Jiren pushed his energy to the max and boosted the speed of his ki beam to its limit, directly catching up with Broly's rapidly moving body. Bang! The collision resulted in a gigantic explosion. Jiren took deep breaths as he observed every minute movement on the area Broly was blasted into. The stage was already a mess to say the least. There were no pieces larger than a quarter of the initial stage left floating around. As the dust of the explosion Broly was caught into was slowly setting down, a red glow could be seen. A ki sphere around Broly's unharmed body was revealed. Broly laughed. What was that supposed to be, Jiren? Broly didn't give Jiren time to be shocked as he shot towards Jiren. Jiren couldn't even react until Broly had already arrived in front of him. A punch directly landed on Jiren's face and was sending him flying through several boulders until he hit the largest piece that was still remaining of the stage. That piece was moved by Jiren's impact and slowly descended into the void. Jiren quickly jumped out of the rubble and adjusted his dislocated jaw. He spit out some blood as he looked at Broly, who was still standing on the spot, looking down at him. Jiren was frustrated as he felt that his strikes seemed to have no impact on Broly. He went into this tournament believing that no one was his equal, but now Broly stood proudly in front of him, pushing back against his full power. Even the other Saiyan called Goku and Vegeta had broken through their limits several times and had grown a lot stronger. Jiren feared that Broly might do the same, so he didn't stop and pushed forward again. He stomped the ground, cracking it open in the process, as he shot to Broly. Broly jumped to Jiren as well, and both met with their fist in the middle. The resulted shockwave forced both back and turned the near debris to fine dust particles. They both landed on a floating boulder respectively. Jiren's fist was bleeding from that exchange, but he didn't stop as he once again dashed towards Broly, who shook his hand slightly while frowning. They both turned to a red line and clashed in the middle again. This time they weren't forced backwards as they dodged their opponent's strike. They stopped for a moment before they moved again at high speed. Their arms seemed still, but they were just moving so rapidly that they were invisible for even experienced eyes. They used small rocks that were broken off the stage as a foothold and clashed with each other numerous times. Belmod was getting anxious as he saw Jiren on the losing side. Although neither of them was pushed backwards by each other's strength, Jiren's body accumulated more wounds with each exchange, while Broly overall seemed fine and unharmed. It was like Broly's body was on a completely different toughness scale. Jiren blinked because of the pain he felt at another exchange, which resulted in him being grabbed at the ankle. He tried to kick himself free, but he was already flung away, sent crashing through numerous floating stage pieces. Just as he could stop himself, Broly caught up and slapped Jiren's head into the ground. The boulder crumbled apart from the impact and was then breaking apart into more pieces as Broly followed up with a punch in the guts. Jiren flew across the battlefield before he was stopped by a larger piece of the pillar. He didn't dare to rest there for a second and jumped away. Just after he got away, the pillar was met with a ki blast that completely obliterated it. Jiren's jumping direction was disrupted through the explosion and he crash-landed on another rock. He quickly looked around and suddenly punched out at the seemingly empty air. Broly seemed to appear out of the blue with his head tilted sideways, evading Jiren's fist. Jiren wanted to attack again, but a kick against the side of his kneecap forced him to the ground and made him miss his counterattack. Then an uppercut disorientated him completely for a moment. He couldn't even try to block the hand that grasped his head. Jiren's face was dragged across a rock before being thrown into the air. Before he could turn around and retaliate, Broly kicked his spine. Jiren's body bent backwards as if it would snap in two with a bit more force. He was sent flying high into the sky in an arch before he luckily landed on a larger floating island. Jiren gritted his teeth and stood up again and took a step forward. Unsurprisingly, his leg gave in and he collapsed onto his knees. He gasped for air as his sweat dropped onto the stone beneath him. He looked at his hands that were still trembling from their fists clashing. Blood was dripping down out of wounds that covered almost every corner of his body. He had countless bruises and his muscles were aching, begging for rest. His back felt like it would collapse any second, and every other part of his body was sending out signals of pain as well. A shadow was cast above his head. He looked up at Broly, who still looked perfectly fine, except for some smaller bruises that were healed in front of Jiren's eyes. This gave him another shock that showed him the reality of things. He couldn't maintain his poker face anymore as his confidence was crushed by this overwhelming defeat. His eyes conveyed his despair and loss of fighting will. His head drooped as he didn't dare to look at Broly. Universe 11 spectators couldn't believe their eyes as they saw Jiren's defeated figure. "What are you doing, Jiren?" Toppo suddenly furiously bellowed. "You would kneel before an enemy? Is this pathetic image how you end? Get up, Jiren." Broly looked at Toppo before he turned to Jiren again. He wanted to see if it would be the same as in the series. What did you build your strength while trusting no one all this time for? Fight for your pride until the end. You may not believe in your own strength, but I do. Until the end. Jiren, you are strong. You are stronger than anyone. As if it was a magic spell, Jiren once again stood up with a blazing aura surrounding his body like furious flames. Jiren clenched his hand to a fist, before waving it towards Broly, releasing a wall of flaming ki in the process. It scorched through the air as it headed for Broly. It blazed across the entire island they were standing on and instantly reached Broly. Broly raised his arms as he stopped the attack with a barrier. Broly increased his power as he held up against the attack before Jiren shouted out, "Begone, Broly!"